Chapter 925. With that, Gohan flew back into the distorted sealed land without looking back. "Dad, what are you going to do?" Goo Black Tortoise turned his head and wanted to grab the corner of Gohan's clothes, but unexpectedly, he was stopped by Liu Ling. "Don't stop your brother. Your brother's going to do something very important." Liu Ling comforted. "What important thing? It's not like you don't know how dangerous this sealed space is. What if Dad gets lost in there?" Goo Black Tortoise retorted agitatedly. "Don't worry. With your brother's ability, it's a simple matter to retrieve the two sword ladies before he gets completely lost in this distorted space." Liu Ling's face was calm. "You have to believe in your brother's ability. This small matter is not difficult for him." "Oomph. You don't care about my father at all, so of course you would say something like that," Goo Black Tortoise bluntly criticized. At the same time, he continued to struggle. "Let go of me. Quickly let go of me. He's your brother, not your dad." Liu Ling was about to go crazy from Goo Black Tortoise's repeated "Dad, I understand your brother better than you. Once your brother has decided on something, he will absolutely not give up. Right now, he wants to save the two sword ladies. You'd better obediently stand here and wait for him. Don't give him trouble. Become his burden. Do you understand?" "What do you know? How can you understand my dad better than me?" Goo Black Tortoise said as he took the hand that Liu Ling was grabbing onto his wrist and bit down hard. But in reality, everyone had their own judgment as to who was more knowledgeable about freezing the cold. Even if Goo Black Tortoise had a sharp mouth, biting his hand was indeed very painful. But Liu Ling did not say a word, only allowing Goo Black Tortoise to wantonly bite the back of her hand. "Oomph. Damn, Gohan. Your sister's debt is all on your head. Sooner or later you'll pay it back." Liu Ling thought hatefully in her heart. As soon as Gohan flew back to the sealed area, he felt the heavy weight pressing down on his heart once again. Moreover, it was much heavier than when he came out. Gohan found it difficult to even breathe. He had to save the Taiji Yang sword first because the white Taiji Yang sword was the closest to Gohan. Naturally, he had to save the sword first. Although his heart was incomparably heavy, and if he wanted to jump up to the ceiling, he would need to use dozens of times more strength than usual. However, this was not a difficult thing for Gohan, so Gohan easily held the white Taiji Yang sword in his hand. "Thank you." The moment the Taiji Yang sword entered his hand, Gohan seemed to faintly hear the Taiji Yang sword's voice of gratitude coming from Zifu. As the Taiji Yang sword and the Taiji Yin sword were located at the two most extreme positions in the northern part of the sealed space, Gohan had to spend even more time and energy to save the Taiji Yin sword after saving the Taiji Yang sword. As time passed, the amount of energy Gohan needed to move through the twisted sealed area increased. Compared to when he had just entered the door, the amount of energy he needed to spend was 10 times more. Next, Gohan discovered that with every passing second, the suppression on his strength in the twisted space doubled. When Gohan used what little energy he had left to reach the black Taiji Yin sword, Gohan felt that he did not even have the strength to jump. Heavenly Sword. Helpless, Gohan could only change the sword Maiden from the Chidian sword to the Heavenly Sword. Then he took out the wine gourd from the Heavenly Sword and drank a mouthful of the most delicious green plum wine. In an instant, a vigorous power filled Gohan's body. At the same time, Gohan took on the appearance of a shining golden general. A claw-shaped yellow lightning sprouted from the ground and carried Gohan up into the air, allowing Gohan to collect the black Taiji Yin sword that was stuck in the ceiling into his pouch. In this way, the two Taiji Yin Yang swords were both in Gohan's hands. While riding on the flying claw yellow lightning, Gohan could also quickly escape from the seal that was about to reach its limit. Everything seemed to be going quite well. "See, I told you to believe in your brother. This little difficulty is not a problem for him," said Liu Ling to Gu Xuanwu, who had been watching everything from the outside. Probably because she saw that Gohan was fine, Liu Ling's grip on Gu Xuanwu's wrist loosened a little. Gu Xuanwu also focused all his attention on Gohan. His teeth that were tightly biting on Liu Ling's hand loosened. At the same time, the sprinting clawed yellow lightning was approaching the entrance of the sealed area. Seeing that Gahan was about to complete his task and leave the twisted land with the Taiji yin-yang swords. Suddenly, Gahan's eyes glanced at the middle of the ceiling. There was a broken fluorescent lamp in that position. At the position of the fluorescent lamp's light source, there was a white dwarf fragment that Gahan had been wearing for a long time. Through the distorted space and time, the white dwarf fragment shone brightly. That's right. I should also retrieve the white dwarf fragment. Maybe it has something to do with I Ching. When Gahan saw the white dwarf fragment, he could not help but think of the white dwarf fragment that he once had that had fused with the starting point. Therefore, a strong desire surged in Gahan's heart. He wanted to control the white dwarf fragment in his hands. Clawed yellow lightning still has 7 seconds. This is enough time for me to get the white dwarf fragment. Gahan thought to himself. He immediately turned his horse around and rode clawed yellow lightning towards the location of the white dwarf fragment. You stopped? Why did you stop? At that moment, no one seemed to notice Shizaki Kuzo, who was lying on his spiritual equipment. Everyone's attention was on Gahan. Therefore, these people naturally did not notice that the gate of eternity and truth, which had been expanding continuously, had gradually stopped expanding. It had condensed into a fixed diameter and was motionless. There was still at least a third of the area left before it could devour the entire spiritual equipment. Move. Hurry up and move. Kuzo 3 touched the gate of eternity and truth that had stopped expanding. Although her voice was very calm, the madness in her calmness could be easily felt by a 7-starred ladybug. What happened next made Kuzo 3 even angrier. After a few seconds of stagnation, the gate of eternity and truth finally moved again. However, this time, it did not move to expand again. Instead, it began to shrink slowly. It was about to return to its closed state. No, this cannot be. One could imagine the anger in Kuzo 3's heart. She began to think about how to expand the gate of eternity and truth again. Soon, she seemed to understand something. There is not enough energy. There must be not enough energy. Kuzo 3 attributed the closing of the gate of eternity and truth to the lack of energy. She believed that the energy in Gilgamesh's heroic soul was not enough to support the opening of the gate of eternity and truth to its limit. Therefore, the gate that could travel through space and time was preparing to close again. Energy. I need more energy. Kuzo 3 suddenly looked up and saw Gahan above her, who was about to grab the white dwarf fragment. Kuzo 3, who was in a state of madness, did not care who Gahan was. She aimed the rifle in her hand at the gate of eternity and truth and fired a shot. Suddenly, a silvery white light shot out from the gate of eternity and truth and shone directly on Gahan's body. At this time, Gahan's palm was only 1 step away from the white dwarf fragment. However, this step was like the end of the world. This was because Gahan found that his body was firmly covered by a silvery white light. This silvery white light was like a pair of powerful hands that grabbed Gahan and tried to drag him into the gate of eternity and truth so that he could become the energy for the gate of eternity and truth to continue expanding. Hold! Gahan squeezed the belly of Claw Huang Feidian, who was under his leg, and tried to order Claw Huang Feidian to break free from the binding of the silvery white light. However, after letting out a shrill cry, Huang Feidian, who had used all the strength in his body, was unable to push Gahan back even a step. Hiss! Claw Huang Feidian let out a final neigh before turning into golden light and disappearing. The effect of the green plum wine had worn off. Without Claw Huang Feidian's help, Gahan was even more unable to fight against the silvery white light. He was about to be sucked into the gate of eternity and truth. That, seeing that Gahan was in danger, Gu Xuanwu took advantage of Liu Ling's unpreparedness and pushed Liu Ling away. He then rushed into the twisted seal and grabbed Gahan's hand, trying to pull Gahan back from the control of the silvery white light. Be careful! After a moment of confusion, Liu Ling also rushed in behind Gu Xuanwu and grabbed Gahan's arm. A few seconds later, Ashima also rushed over, and 3 people grabbed Gahan's arm at the same time. They were barely able to resist the pulling force of the silvery white light and maintain a situation where they could neither advance nor retreat. EB asterisk starts. Don't ruin my plan. Seeing this scene, Kwang 3 rushed over angrily and shot a bullet directly at the 3 hands that were grabbing Gahan's arm. She tried to use the pain to force Liu Ling and the others to retreat so that Guhan could become the energy of the gate of eternity and truth. However, what Kwang 3 didn't expect was that no matter how many shots she fired, the 3 hands still firmly grabbed Gahan's wrist and refused to let go. Are you all his harem? Kwang 3 showed a ferocious smile. Well, I was just afraid that one person's energy wouldn't be enough. The gate of eternity and truth has been opened to the limit, so I'll let the 3 of you become the energy of this gate together. After saying that, Kwang 3 took out her rifle, aimed at the gate of eternity and truth, and fired another shot. The silver light that bloomed from the gate of eternity and truth instantly doubled in size, making the balance that was originally maintaining instantly tilt to the side of the gate of eternity and truth. Moreover, it was an unstoppable tilt. It seemed that all 4 people were about to become the energy of the gate of eternity and truth. Let go of me. Let me go in. I understand everything. This may be my destiny. Gahan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said to the 3 women who were grabbing his arm, because at this moment, Gahan finally understood. The jasper ring on his finger not only reminded Gahan of I Ching's face, but it also reminded him of I Ching's face. In fact, Gahan had already figured out that there was only one explanation for all the mysteries about I Ching. That was, Gahan himself must have gone back to the past and had a touching love affair with I Ching at that time. That was why I Ching knew so many things about him. That was why I Ching left behind countless foreshadowing in Sword Maiden Online to help him. That was why he could become a famous swordsman in just a few months, just like a favored son of heaven. These must be the legacies left behind in the past, so Gahan had long suspected that he would go back to the past at some point in the future in some way. Now that moment had finally come. He did not expect that it would actually be at this time, through the gate of eternity and truth opened by Shizaki Kwang 3, to return to the past. But this was also good. Finally, it was time for Gahan to fulfill his destiny. Therefore, with a slight twist of his wrist, Gahan broke free from the restraint of Liu Ling and the others in a snake-like way. Then, under the powerful suction of the silver light, he flew toward the other side of the gate of eternity and truth that he could not see clearly in the past. We will meet again. I will be back. Gahan's voice said from afar. Chapter 926. BK my ass. Do you think you're Arnold Schwarzenegger? A sword hilt suddenly appeared on Gahan's chest as he was flying towards the gate of truth and eternity. Then Gahan, who felt that he couldn't resist the silver light of the gate of truth and eternity, directly flew out of the gate of the sealed place and landed in the hall outside the gate. Ancestor, you haven't left yet. Liu Ling shouted in surprise, because the person who rescued Gahan at this critical time was none other than Liu Ling's ancestor, Kinzu Fleeting Calendar. Ha ha! Fleeting Calendar laughed twice. Today is a heaven-sent opportunity. I won't leave so easily. What heaven-sent opportunity? Kinzu's words made Gahan, who was stagnant in his meridians, feel very strange. This was clearly a fierce battle. How did it turn into a heaven-sent opportunity? Kinzu, don't ruin my plan. Kwang 3 shouted frantically at Kinzu. Is this guy crazy? How dare he yell at Kinzu? Even Gilgamesh was killed by Kinzu's sword. I'm afraid this woman won't even be able to withstand half a sword, Ashma said with a surprised expression. Obviously, she didn't understand why Kwang San would be so bold. No, you're wrong. I'm not going to ruin your plans. On the contrary, I'm going to help you. The sword master said something that made everyone's jaw drop. What is this Kinzu talking about? He actually said that he wants to help Kwang 3? What the hell is going on? Could it be that Kinzu has taken a fancy to this Kwang 3? You want to help me? If you want to help me, Then throw that man in for me. I want to use his flesh and blood to open my gate of truth and eternity. Kwang 3 pointed at Gahan and shouted frantically, "That won't do. I can't give him to you." Kinzu shrugged. "Without him, the world would be finished. I'm counting on him to take over my unfinished business. I can't hand him over to you." "Then hand over the woman next to him." Kwang Sim pointed at Lian Ling. "No, no. This is even more unacceptable." Kinzu hurriedly waved his hand. "She's my only bloodline. She's the only direct descendant of the Lunyan family. If I give her to you, I won't have any descendants. I can't do that." Then this heavy woman. Kwang 3 had no choice but to change his target again. "A heavy woman? Are you talking about me?" Ashima shook her body in astonishment, and then her breasts rose and fell like waves. It seemed that the word heavy was quite accurate to describe her. "She can't either. She doesn't have much power in her body. Even if she puts all her power into your gate of truth and eternity, it can only open a little more. It's useless for her to go in alone." Kinzu refused again, but the reason for his refusal made Ashima feel sad. Why did he change the reason to her lack of power when it came to her? They were all famed swordsmen, and if she wasn't strong enough, did it mean that Gahan and Lian Ling were strong enough? "Even if you're Kinzu, you can't bully people like this. Are you messing with me?" Kwang 3 didn't even ask about the black tortoise, because she finally realized that Kinzu was messing with her. "No, no, no, no." Kinzu denied it again. "You're wrong. I'm not messing with you. I really want to help you." "Good. Then tell me how you want to help me. How are you going to completely open this gate of eternity and truth?" Kwang 3 asked loudly. "Actually, I don't have any special method. My method is the same as yours, which is to fill this gate with enough energy to open it to its limit." Kinzu laughed. "What a joke. If that's the case, why are you stopping me from sacrificing these people?" It felt like the conversation had returned to its original routine, back to Gahan's head. "TSK, TSK, TSK. Is there really something wrong with your eyes? You don't want to choose the sword soul of an Emperor sword level sword wielder, but you have to choose some famous sword level sword wielder who hasn't even grown up yet. Aren't you neglecting the essentials?" The sword ancestor squinted his eyes and laughed. "What did you say? Can you say that again?" Kwang 3 instantly recovered from his state of madness and became dumbstruck. Did she hear it wrong? Could it be that the sword ancestor actually intended to sacrifice himself? "Ancestor, are you crazy? Ignore this lunatic. Let's go." Lian Ling felt that something was wrong. She immediately wanted to grab Kinzu's arm. However, the moment her hand touched Kinzu's arm, she found that she grabbed thin air. This was not the real fleeting calendar, but the fleeting calendar's sword soul. "Do you understand now? My great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. P.S. How many great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter? I'm just a sword soul. Even if I leave now, this body of mine will disappear from this world sooner or later, and it won't bring any benefits to this world." The sword master rubbed his face against fleeting times when he did not have a physical body. "After all, I'm just a sword soul. Even if I leave now, this body will disappear from this world sooner or later. On the contrary, if I transform into energy and enter the door of truth and eternity, then I will have done immeasurable good deeds. At the very least, I can make a little contribution to this world's past, and to this world's future. Don't you think that's great?" After saying this, Kinzu's body took the initiative to enter the gate of eternity and truth. The moment Kinzu's sword soul entered the gate of eternity and truth, the entire gate of eternity and truth expanded more than 10 times in an instant. Not only did it swallow the original carving Emperor's roulette, but the entire sealed land was also enveloped by this huge gate of eternity and truth. It looked almost the same size as the entire Tiananmen Gate. "Is this Kinzu's strength?" Gahan said in a daze. Kinzu's sword soul and Gilgamesh's heroic soul should be on the same level. They were both just spiritual bodies of the original body, and they only had less than a tenth of the original body's strength. However, Gilgamesh's heroic soul could only open a gate the size of a person, but Kinzu's sword soul could expand this gate to the size of the entire Tiananmen Gate. One could imagine how powerful Kinzu was. My little friend Gahan, I've let you down today. Even if you want to destroy the entire Leonian family, the Leonian family will not resist. Will do as you wish. When the gate of eternity and truth expanded to its largest size, Kinzu's sword soul's last words suddenly sounded out from the gate. What does that mean? Kinzu's words confused Gahan. Although the Leonian family had cheated him since he became a swordsman, the Leonian family had helped him more often than not. If it weren't for the Leonian family, he wouldn't have his current achievements, much less the Chidian sword. Furthermore, the Leonian family had saved Gahan from Gilgamesh. If it weren't for the Leonian family and Leonian Ling, Gahan would already be a hard corpse. So, to put it bluntly, it was Gahan who owed the Leonian family, not the other way around. But why did Kinzu say such a thing in the end? He actually said that he'd let me down? Even if I destroy the entire Leonian family, the Leonian family will not resist and will do as I wish. What's he talking about? Is Gahan retarded? Why would Gahan want to destroy the Leonian family for no reason? Just as Guhan was pondering this question, a shocking change occurred in an instant. From the depths of the door of truth and eternity, a long sword suddenly flew out. This long sword directly appeared in front of Gu Xuanwu. Then, the blade of the sword turned into a stream of water that wrapped around Gu Xuanwu's waist. Then, it shrunk and disappeared into the door of truth and eternity with Gu Xuanwu. The entire process was simply too fast, so fast that the entire process was close to the speed of light. Guhan didn't even have a single thought. Gu Xuanwu didn't even have time to change his expression before he was swept into the door of truth and eternity by the sword. What happened? Gu Xuanwu? Gu Xuanwu? Gahan's left hand was slightly bent, and his palm kept groping downwards as if he was trying to feel something. Just a second ago, this hand was still holding the Gu Xuanwu in his embrace. But after 0.00001 seconds, this person was gone. Gahan could still feel the outline of Gu Xuanwu's body, as well as her gradually disappearing body temperature. Not good. Someone has gone in. The gate is about to close. Just like Gahan, Quang 3 was also dumbfounded. This was because the gate of eternity and truth was closing at the same speed as when it was opened. This meant that someone had gone back to the past through the gate of eternity and truth. The energy of the gate of eternity and truth was almost depleted and was about to close. No! Quang 3 let out a scream. Then, ignoring the danger of entering the closing gate, she directly entered the gate. Quang 3's body finally passed through the gate at the last moment before it closed. As for whether she could successfully pass through, only the heavens knew. The sealed land that was covered by the gate of eternity and truth disappeared along with the gate. The modernized I Ching's house had disappeared, and in its place was a big, dark hole. The walls of the big hole were moist, as if the big hole had just been dug out. The entire sealed land had been taken away by the gate of eternity and truth. Clang! Gohan's body fell heavily on the ground. His pupils bulged, and his breathing stopped. It was as if he was dead. Gohan! Gohan, what happened to you? Leonian Ling hurriedly hugged Gohan in her arms. Her whole body was covered in tears at this moment. Chapter 9:27. Sister, sister. This pervert has finally woken up. Sister, sister. If this pervert really wakes up, will he do something terrible to us? When Gahan opened his eyes, he saw Om and Dayam hugging each other in fear, as if Gahan would eat them. Gahan raised his head and looked around. He found that he had returned to his room in the castle of Maple Kingdom. The layout of the room was exactly the same as when he left. It seemed that no one had deliberately renovated it. Gu Xuanwu, that is your young lady, she, how is she? Is she back? Gohan asked with the last bit of hope. Gohan hoped that Om and Dayam could tell him that Gu Xuanwu had returned. Everything he had seen before he fainted was just an illusion. Gu Xuanwu had not been pulled into the gate of eternity and truth. Sister, sister, why is he asking us this question? Shouldn't we be asking him this question? Sister, sister, this is indeed the question we should ask him. Where's our young lady? Why didn't we see the young lady coming back with him? All right, it seems that I am not hallucinating. Everything is real. The conversation between Om and Dayum completely shattered Gahan's fantasy. Gahan finally began to face the fact that Gu Xuanwu had been pulled into the reality of the gate of eternity and truth. Who sent me back? Gahan sorted out his thoughts and asked Om and Dayum. Sister, sister. It was a woman who had never seen him before who sent him back. How did he have so many women? Sister, sister. We must have less contact with this man in the future. Maybe he is planning to include us in the harem. Guhan was too lazy to complain about Om and the sister's sharp retorts. Ashima and the other two had already seen her. Obviously, the woman that the maid sisters had not seen before was naturally Fleeting Ling. It was Fleeting Ling who had sent him back. Where is she now? Guhan was silent for a long time before he finally asked the two sisters. She's squatting outside the door. The electrician finally stopped talking to his sister and began to speak human language. Well, she seems to have said that she doesn't have the face to see you, but she's afraid that will hurt you, so she's been guarding the door. She's been squatting for a whole day. Om added, please invite her in. I have something to say to her. After Gahan finished speaking, Om and the electric sisters couldn't wait to run out, then opened the door and said a few words to the people outside. Gahan heard a stuttering footstep slowly approaching him, and finally sat on his bed. Throughout the entire process, there was no other sound other than the sound of footsteps. Even the sound of breathing was deliberately suppressed by the other party. It felt like a child who had done something wrong and was called to the teacher's office. Sorry. After a period of silence, Lin Yanling finally broke the silence and bravely opened her mouth to apologize to Gahan. Why are you saying sorry to me? Gahan's voice remained calm, as if there was no anger in it. It was my ancestor who took your sister away. Liu Yanling admitted honestly. How do you know that it was Lord Kinzu who took Black Tortoise away? Gahan turned his body and looked at Liu Yanling, who was sitting beside him. How do you know that it was Kinzu who did it? Why don't you say that it was Kuzo Shizaki who did it? The two of us clearly didn't even see what took Gu Black Tortoise away. How can you be sure that it was your ancestor? This can be hidden from others, but it can't be hidden from me, Liu Yanling said in a low voice. It was a sword that took your sister away. I am very familiar with the sword's aura. It can even be said that I grew up under the influence of that sword. Although it was only for a moment, I can 100% guarantee that it was the Firmament Emperor sword that took your sister away. There is no mistake about this. It was my ancestor who did it. Firmament Emperor sword. Hearing this name, Gahan could not help but look up to the sky and sigh. This name was too familiar to Gahan. In fact, it could be said that there was no human in the world who was not familiar with this name. This was because this was the first Emperor Sword level sword mistress that a human had ever owned. It was also the Emperor Sword level sword mistress that Kinzu had owned. During the battle of the founding Emperor Mausoleum, Kinzu, who was only an immortal sword level sword mistress, was naturally outnumbered when faced with the surprise attack of two Flood level Yuan Ko. He was about to die at the hands of these two shameless Flood level Yuan Ko. However, the founding Emperor Mausoleum suddenly exploded. A giant dragon rose from the mausoleum and finally turned into a sword with golden edges. The blade was tightened in the middle, and the hilt was like a giant dragon with its mouth open. One side of the blade was engraved with the word Firmament, and the other side was engraved with the word Emperor Sword. This was the first Emperor Sword level sword mistress that a human had ever owned, the Firmament Emperor Sword. This Firmament Emperor Sword directly swept Kinzu into the founding Emperor Mausoleum. The two Flood level Yuan Ko could not break through the external defense of the founding Emperor Mausoleum, no matter how much effort they put in. After they attacked for 49 days, just as the two Flood level Yuan Ko were about to give up on killing Kinzu and eliminate the precarious survivors, the Sword Ancestor, who had completely synchronized with the Emperor Sword of Songtian and completed the Jojo competition in the First Emperor Mausoleum, finally ascended to the throne, came out of the First Emperor Mausoleum. It only took him less than an hour to kill the two flood-level bandits under the Emperor's Sword of Songtian. In the years that followed, Kenzu used the Firmament Emperor's Sword to kill more than 30 flood-level and desolation-level Yuan-Ko. He killed until the entire world turned around. Previously, it was those damn Yuan-Ko who chased and killed humans everywhere. But now, it was Kenzu who led the sword-bearers to chase and kill Yuan-Ko everywhere. Those Yuan-Ko could only desperately hide or simply move their lair into the dimensional rift to resist Kenzu's massacre. Anyway, those decades were probably the happiest decades for humans. Humans even had the thought of reclaiming the entire world and ending the age of destruction. Unfortunately, as Kenzu was pulled into the dimensional rift by the creation divinity, humans lost a powerful leader. They had no choice but to retreat to a few base cities and start a long tug-of-war with Yuan-Ko that lasted for 1,000 years. Therefore, the Firmament Emperor's Sword had an extremely powerful symbolic meaning for humans. Although the Firmament Emperor's Sword's ranking had slipped from the first Emperor's Sword level to the 9th, with the continuous birth of sword mistresses, it was undeniable that in the hearts of humans, the Firmament Emperor's Sword was still an unparalleled Emperor's Sword that represented the salvation of the entire human race. More importantly, the Firmament Emperor's Sword was known as the model of all Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses. No, it was the model of all sword mistresses. This was because in the past 1,000 years, the Emperor's Sword of Firmament had been asleep for no more than 3 months. Every time the wielder of the Emperor's Sword of Firmament ascended, the Sword Committee would immediately gather all the wielder of the immortal sword ranked together and hold the ceremony of Firmament. The so-called Firmament ceremony was for them to try to synchronize with the Firmament Emperor's Sword. If they could synchronize successfully, they would be qualified as a crown prince. When all the immortal sword level sword mistresses had completed their synchronized experiments, these immortal sword level sword mistresses with the qualifications to be crown prince would immediately begin the 9 states competition. Once someone defeated the other opponents in the 9 states competition, the new Jindi would ascend to the throne under the gaze of all humans and become the new generation of Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses. The 1,000 years of history had proven that every firmament ceremony would have more than 3 immortal sword level sword mistresses synchronized with the Firmament Emperor's Sword and successfully obtain the qualifications to be crown prince. The 9 states competition of the Firmament Emperor's Sword level was extremely difficult. At the very least, it was much easier than the 9-state competition of the other Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses. Every time the 9 states competition of the Firmament Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses successfully defeated all the opponents to ascend to the throne and become the strongest thigh of humanity, the Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses. Other than the Firmament Emperor's Sword, the other Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses were not so easy to serve. These Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses were usually in a deep sleep for hundreds of years. They were not even qualified to hold the ceremony to select the crown prince. Even if the ceremony was held and the crown prince was born, the 9 states competition of the Firmament Emperor's Sword level was usually terrifyingly difficult. 90% of the crown princes would fail in the cruel 9 states competition of the Firmament Emperor's Sword level and become dejected losers. If you don't understand what I've said above, you only need to remember the following sentence. In these 1,000 years, humanity has always had an Emperor's Sword level sword mistress protecting everyone. This Emperor's Sword level sword mistress is the cutest Firmament Emperor sword mistress. P.S. The settings related to Emperor's Swords have finally been completed. The true face of the Emperor's Sword level sword mistress will also be revealed to everyone. The Emperor's Sword level sword mistress system is very different from the normal sword mistress system. The relationship between the Lun Yin family and the Firmament Emperor's Sword was not limited to Kenzu alone. All the Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses in the Lun Yin family also had Firmament Emperor's Sword level sword mistresses. It was as if they could not coordinate with the other Emperor Sword level sword mistresses. Moreover, The Firmament Emperor Sword and the Lunian family were very close. When the Firmament Emperor Sword level sword mistress had nothing to do, she loved to go to the Lunian mountain and stay there for a while. She would chat with the descendants of the Lunian family and gossip about Kinzu in the past. When Lunian Ling was born, the Firmament Emperor Sword mistress was very fond of this young lady from the Lunian family. Lunian Ling even remembered lying in the arms of the Firmament Emperor Sword mistress when she was young. It could be said that she had fallen asleep because of the Firmament Emperor Sword mistress scent. That was why Lunian Ling could tell Gahan with certainty that she had used the Firmament Emperor Sword mistress scent to determine that it was the Firmament Emperor Sword that had swept the black tortoise away. Even if Kinzu's sword spirit used the Firmament Emperor Sword mistress, even if Kinzu had become a sword spirit, he could still use his own sword mistress scent to create an illusory but real sword mistress. Chapter 928. So why do you think your ancestor took the black tortoise and brought her back? What if I bring her back to the past? Guhan asked as he looked at Fleeting Time's hand that was tugging at the corner of his shirt. I don't know. Lunian Ling was probably telling the truth. He had never seen Lunian Ling so ashamed before. Is that so? Gahan didn't ask anything else and just looked at Lunian Ling quietly. Will you really hate our Lunian clan from now on? Will you become enemies with our Lunian clan? Lunian Ling asked Gahan with a trembling voice after a long period of silence. She was looking forward to Gahan's answer, but she was also extremely afraid of Gahan's answer. She was looking forward to Gahan's attitude, but she was also afraid of Gahan's attitude. Why should I hate your Lunian clan? Gahan asked with narrowed eyes. Because it's our ancestor. If I hadn't used our ancestor's sword soul scar, then Sister Black Tortoise wouldn't have. Lunian Ling was very clear about this and tried to take responsibility for it. If you hadn't used the sword soul scar, then wouldn't I have died at Gilgamesh's hands? Gahan pursed his lips, but in reality, Gahan wouldn't have died. He was already holding the Jasper Stone in his hand. If Gilgamesh still dared to attack him, he would immediately activate the Jasper Stone and return to Chanyang Mountain. So even if Lunian Ling hadn't appeared in time, Gahan wouldn't have died. But I could have used the 1-meter sword. Lunian Ling's attitude was terrifying. If I had used the 1-meter sword, then Elder Kinzu wouldn't have had to appear, and so many things wouldn't have happened. Forget about it. This has nothing to do with you. Gahan let out a long sigh. Don't worry. I will always remember your kindness. We are still friends. What about the Lunian clan? Lunian Ling seemed to sense that there was something wrong with Gahan's words. What about our Lunian family? Will you do as our ancestors said and destroy our Lunian clan? What kind of joke is that? How could a famed sword wielder like me destroy the #1 family in the world, the Lunian family? Gahan's lips curled up as if he was telling the funniest joke in the world. No, others may not know, but I, Lunian Ling, have a feeling that one day in the future you really can. Before Lunian Ling could finish her sentence, Gahan interrupted her. Say no more. Gahan placed his hand on Lunian Ling's lips. You are you. The Lunian family is the Lunian family, and Kinzu is Kinzu. I can differentiate between the two clearly. That's great. Lunian Ling let out a long sigh of relief. Then you won't become enemies with our Lunian family, and there won't be... Yes, I, Gahan, am not an unreasonable man. This grudge is between me and the Sword Ancestor, so I will settle this grudge with the Sword Ancestor. Guhan said matter-of-factly, settle this with our ancestor. What do you mean? Lunian Ling was at a loss. Kinzu had disappeared for almost 1,000 years. How could Gahan settle this with Kinzu? Could it be, Guhan, could it be that you also want to return to the past, to that era, to find the old ancestor? Lunian Ling finally reacted. It turned out that Gahan was the same as Shizaki Kuzo. He wanted to go back to the past to save Gu Xuanwu and settle his grudge with Kinzu. No, this is too dangerous. There are some secrets that you don't know. Since ancient times, it wasn't that no one wanted to go back to the past, and it wasn't that no one succeeded in passing through the gate of time and space. However, After they went back to the past, they never came back, and history didn't change because of them. There was no information about them in history. After they went back to the past, it was as if they had completely disappeared, never to be seen again. Listen to me, Gahan, you definitely can't go back to the past. I'd rather you kill your way into the Lun Yin family and fight it out with us than go back to the unknown past. Let's talk about the past. Guan gently caressed Lian Yinling's hand. However, I'll have to go back to the Lun Yin family sooner or later. I hope you won't block my way then. What? Didn't you say that the Lun Yin family is the Lun Yin family? You won't put this grudge on us? Lian Yinling said in shock. Why did Gahan's thoughts change so quickly like a child's face? I'm not going to find trouble with your Lun Yin family, but with Kinzu. Gohan paused. Kinzu left behind a total of 12 sword scar soul seals, right? And 8 of them have already been used, right? If you include the extra sword scar soul seal that was used against Gilgamesh and the one that was secretly used in Sword Maiden Online, then your Lun Yin clan should have 3 sword scar soul seals in their hands. Listen up, Ling. Your Lun Yin family must keep these 3 sword scar soul seals safe. I won't take advantage of Kinzu. When I, Gahan, become an immortal sword wielder, I'll personally go to the Lun Yin mountain and fight it out with Kinzu's sword scar soul seal. I've said that I'll settle this debt with Kinzu. With that, Gahan put down Lian Yinling's hand and said tiredly, You can go out. I'm tired. Let me sleep again. All right, you shouldn't stay here anymore. The Wu people are still watching us from the Shanhai Pass. If they discover that you're not here, they might launch another attack on the Shanhai Pass. You should return to the Sun Guard mansion as soon as possible. You're chasing me away, right? Lian Yinling stood up dejectedly. All right, then I'll go. Have a good rest. I'll return to the Shanhai Pass now. Although Lian Yinling got up and left, she still looked back from time to time, hoping that Gahan would stop her. Wait. She didn't expect Gahan to actually stop her. Just as Lian Yinling was about to say something happily, she heard Gahan say, This is a secret. The Yuanko here will not harm humans. They're like the free people in the free city. I hope that you won't reveal the secret here. Let them live here in peace. Do you think I'm that kind of person? Lian Yinling didn't say anything else. She could only smile bitterly and silently walk out of Gahan's room. Past. Gu Xuanwu, Heavenly Cumulus Sword. After Lian Yinling left, Gahan didn't really rest. Instead, his mind was constantly filled with all kinds of information and intelligence that he had obtained in the past. Gradually, a shocking idea appeared in Gahan's mind. Gahan had heard the name Gu Xuanwu from the other sword ladies several times before, so he always thought that Gu Xuanwu was actually the ancestor of his Gu family. When he found out that Gu Xuanwu had jumped out as his daughter, Gahan was still confused and couldn't figure it out. He only roughly thought that the previous Gu Xuanwu was one Gu Xuanwu, and the future Gu Xuanwu was another Gu Xuanwu. They just happened to have the same name. After all, the name Gu Xuanwu wasn't given by Gahan, but by Artoria or Chindo Isuzu. Therefore, it was understandable that they didn't know that Gahan's ancestor was called Gu Xuanwu. But from the looks of it, what if the ancestor Gu Xuanwu and daughter Gu Xuanwu were the same person? Now that Gu Xuanwu had entered the gate of eternity and truth, he had been taken to the distant past. No one knew how many years had passed in the past, so Gu Xuanwu could have appeared in any era in the past. Then, could it be possible that Gu Xuanwu had returned to the beginning of the apocalypse and met Heavenly Cumulus Sword, Mysterious Deep Sword, and other immortal sword ladies, and even became good friends? Therefore, the Heavenly Cumulus Sword had said Gu Xuanwu's name in shock after seeing Gahan. Gu Xuanwu and Gahan looked very similar in appearance. Combining the characteristics of Gahan and Artoria's faces, it wasn't strange that the Heavenly Cumulus Sword could recognize Gahan's origin at a glance. Then, everything could be explained clearly. His ancestor Gu Xuanwu was not from that era, but his biological daughter, Gu Xuanwu, who had traveled to the past yesterday. At the same time, there was another thing that made Gahan realize. The sealed land and the white dwarf fragment in the sealed land had disappeared along with the gate of eternity and truth. Although, according to Ashima, these things would be completely shattered in the chaos of time and space. However, Ashima was only guessing. She had never really traveled through time and space, so it was inevitable that her guess would be wrong. If the sealed land, the white dwarf key, and Gu Xuanwu had traveled to the past, and the timeline of Gu Xuanwu's return was more than 900 years before the apocalypse, then there was no doubt that Gu Xuanwu had returned to an era that was decades earlier than I Ching's birth. Therefore, it could be explained that I Ching's home in Yuzhong City and the gate of that home needed the white dwarf key. These things had actually traveled to more than 900 years ago from yesterday. By the time I Ching was born, Gu Xuanwu should be in his 70s or 80s. Look, he had told Gu Xuanwu about various things related to I Ching. It was very likely that Gu Xuanwu had found I Ching when she was young, raised and taught her, and finally passed the sealed land and the white dwarf key to I Ching. Gu Xuanwu and Guhan looked so similar. As long as Gu Xuanwu dressed up as a man and put on makeup, he could even become a real Guhan. This was too scary. Countless beads of sweat appeared on Guhan's forehead. At this moment, he seemed to have solved all the mysteries. Chapter 9:29. Liu Yinling left, and so did Ashima. When Guhan woke up the next day, apart from the sword maidens, there were no other humans by his side. Guhan! No, there was still a human by his side. The little lowly that Guhan saved from hiding in the rubbish bin was still by Guhan's side. She had no intention of going home at all. However, Guhan could no longer stay in Guangguang amusement park. He no longer had any attachment to this place, and it was time for Guhan to leave. On the way back, he could send this little lowly named 2303 back to her parents. Although it was foreseeable that this little lowly would soon lose her innocent lowly smile and turn into a dull walking corpse like most of the humans here without sufficient food and could only rely on the fragrant powder in the air to survive. However, it cannot be helped. It was impossible for Guhan to keep the little lowly by his side. Although she would become a walking corpse in Guangguang amusement park, at least her life would be safe. However, if she followed Guhan to Shanghai Pass, when the Wu people came to attack, this little lowly would definitely be the first victim. There was no doubt about it. After packing his luggage, Guhan left his room with the sword maidens. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he bumped into Dr. Roman, whom he had met once before. Guhan narrowed his eyes when he saw Dr. Roman. This was because Dr. Roman had walked out of the room that originally belonged to Chidu, Isuzu. Dr. Roman. Hello. Guhan took the initiative to greet Dr. Roman. Hello, Mr. Guhan. Roman glanced at the sword maidens behind Guhan and smiled curiously. Are you leaving, Mr. Guhan? Yes. After all, this is not a place for us sword bearers. It's time for me to leave. Guhan nodded. I'm fine. After all, Mr. Guhan was once the son-in-law of Guangguang amusement park. As long as Mr. Guhan is willing, you can come back anytime. We sincerely welcome you. Dr. Roman took the initiative to shake Guhan's hand. Is Dr. Roman in charge of Shining Amusement Park now? Guhan skillfully pulled his hand out from Dr. Roman's grip and asked curiously. Yeah, actually, I don't want to do such a troublesome thing. However, the general manager had passed away and the deputy general manager had returned to the past. The entire Guangwei amusement park could not be without a leader. In the end, during the meeting yesterday, everyone unanimously forced me to take this position. I couldn't refuse even if I wanted to. I had no choice but to sit here temporarily as a temporary manager. Manager Roman scratched his head. But my position is temporary. As soon as Miss Black Tortoise comes back, she will be the manager of Guanghui Amusement Park. I'm just helping her look after it temporarily. There's no need to add a temporary term for yourself. Guhan patted Dr. Roman's shoulder. Just be the general manager of this amusement park. I believe that even if Black Tortoise comes back, she won't want to stay here anymore. She has a wider world in the future. She won't be confined here anymore. Is that so? But the wider the world, the more troubles there are. Dr. Roman's eyes were bright and full of vigor. They were filled with a brilliance that Guhan had only seen in the eyes of a powerhouse who had seen through the mundane world. There's no better place than here. Only after you've passed the peak will you understand that a simple and peaceful life is the best. That's only your personal peak. That's only your personal peace and happiness. Gahan looked out the window at the countless people walking around Guanghui amusement park like walking corpses. When the whole world can live a peaceful and happy life, that's true peace and happiness. Then I can only pray that you can realize this one day. Dr. Roman suddenly leaned his back against Gahan's back. Everyone's thoughts are beautiful, but no matter how powerful a person is, the world can't move according to his will. Even the God who created this world can't do anything when faced with the changes of the world. We're already very lucky to be able to keep our own freedom. It's a fool's dream to think that we can influence others. No matter how strong a huge tree is, it can't stop the unceasing flow of the Yangtze River. Only by turning oneself into a small boat and drifting on the river can one be truly peaceful and happy. I heard that in ancient times, there was an emperor who used his entire life to change the course of the Yangtze River and the Yellow River, as well as thousands of tributaries. In the end, he turned ancient Huaxia into a paradise on earth. I, Gahan, am not talented, but I want to learn from this emperor Yu. Even if I can't change the course of the Yangtze River and the Yellow River, I can at least fill up the stinking ditch beside me. Young man, Dr. Roman clenched his fist and punched Gahan's waist. I'll wait for this day. With that, Dr. Roman slowly walked towards the depths of the castle. Carrying the little lowly 2303, Gahan walked on the muddy streets of the radiant city with a few sword maidens behind him. Although he couldn't bring the little lowly back to the human world, Gahan was still able to escort her home. Under the guidance of the little lowly, Gahan walked for over 10 minutes on a muddy path and finally arrived at the door of a thatched hut. This was a very simple thatched hut. The thatch on the roof seemed to have not been taken care of for a very long time. It could be seen that the thatch on the roof had been completely empty in a few places, leaving behind holes. The walls of the thatched hut were not much better. Not only were there all sorts of holes on the walls, but a small part of the wall had also completely collapsed. Without opening the door, Gahan could clearly see the situation inside the thatched hut. "Daddy, Mommy, I'm back." Since she hadn't been home for a long time, the little lowly excitedly rushed home. Unfortunately, compared to the little lowly's excitement, the people in the house were extremely cold. The parents sat on the bed like stiff corpses. After hearing the little lowly's voice, they merely glanced at her and ignored her. Only a boy who was slightly older than the little lowly revealed an excited expression. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. In the end, the little boy closed his mouth and sat on the bed like his parents, no longer paying attention to the little lowly who had returned home. Are they really 2303's mommy and daddy? Seeing this scene, Qi Jian was very sad. Although they already knew about the state of this world from Gahan, when these sword maidens saw these apathetic humans with their own eyes, they couldn't help but feel sorrowful. These were humans, the primate of all living beings. They were a group of living humans, but now they had become walking corpses. What was the point of living like this? I'll think of a way to save them in the future. But for now, we have to go back. Gahan waved at 2303 and left Radiant City with the sword maidens, leaving this place where Gahan had completely lost his black tortoise. "Big brother Gahan, where are you guys going?" Seeing that Gahan and the rest were about to leave, 2303 immediately strode out of the straw hut with her slender legs, wanting to hug Gahan. However, with a slight push of Gahan's palm, a gentle gust of wind enveloped 2303's body, directly blowing 2303 back onto his bed. "Big brother Gahan, don't you want to go? 2303 doesn't want to leave you. 2303 still wants to eat with you." 2303 kept struggling on the bed, but no matter how much she struggled, Gahan's sword chi kept her firmly on the bed. Gahan took one last look at 2303 and let out a long sigh. With another wave of sword chi, he prepared to close the door of the straw hut and cut off 2303's thoughts. "Little fellow, you've already let this child taste the deliciousness of food, and she's still so young. I'm afraid that after you leave, she won't be willing to absorb the fragrant powder in the air anymore. I'm afraid that the child's only fate is to starve to death." An old voice came from behind Gahan, causing the flesh on Gahan's face to slightly tremble. Actually, Gahan had already noticed an old man walking towards him. However, Gahan thought that this old man was also a walking corpse, so he didn't pay much attention to him. He didn't expect that this old man was actually a normal human who could speak so clearly. "Old man, what do you mean by that?" Gahan turned around and asked. "Let me tell you a story. I originally had 4 grandchildren, but I'm only left with 1 now. Due to a moment of carelessness, I left a piece of bread on the table, and it was eaten by my 3 grandchildren. In the end, because my 3 poor grandchildren tasted the deliciousness of food, they couldn't eat the fragrant powder in the air anymore. Their parents didn't care about their children's lives at all. By the time I went to see them, the 3 grandchildren had already starved to death." The old man spoke very calmly, but Gahan could hear a deep sorrow in this calmness. At the same time, Gahan completely understood what this old man meant. If it was really as he said, 2303, this little lowly who had tasted the deliciousness of food would most likely completely starve to death because she refused to use the fragrant powder in the air. After all, children didn't have the ability to control themselves. They weren't like adults who would disregard everything to survive. Sigh. With a sweep of Gahan's sword chi, the straw hut's door suddenly burst open. This little lowly, flew back like a frisbee and landed firmly in Gahan's arms. "Big brother Gahan, don't leave me behind. In the future, I'll only eat a bowl of porridge for every meal or half a bowl." 2303 only wants to stay by Big Brother Gahan's side. "Big Brother Gahan, don't leave me behind." 2303 cried until her face was like a flower in front of Gahan. However, she didn't know if it was because she was afraid that crying too loudly would make Gahan hate her and leave her here. Therefore, when 2303 cried, she used her little hands to cover her mouth and let out meowing sounds like a kitten. "Come with me. I think you must have a lot of questions to ask me." The old man looked at her with a faint smile and no longer said anything to Gahan. He slowly walked deeper into the city center of Radiant City. Chapter 9:30. "Lord, please take a seat." The old man's house was located in the deepest part of Radiant City. It was also the only brick house in the entire city. It was also the only one that looked decent and had been frequently repaired. "Lord, please have a taste. This is the green grass tea unique to Radiant City. I've tasted its taste before." The old man placed a cup of green tea in front of him. Gahan picked up the cup and lightly swirled it in front of his nose. He immediately knew that this cup of green grass tea was truly worthy of its name. It was made entirely from green grass. There was a strong smell of grass and soil in it. This wasn't a taste that ordinary people could accept. However, Gahan didn't hesitate and drank the tea in one gulp. I want it too." When Qingpin saw Gahan drinking the tea, he thought that it was some kind of peerless delicacy. He hugged Gahan's arm and shouted. The old man faintly smiled and poured another cup of tea for Qingpin. Qingpin only took a sip and instantly sprayed the tea out of his mouth like a fountain. "What a disgusting taste. It's like eating grass." Qingpin grumbled in dissatisfaction. "Qingpin, please keep quiet. Otherwise, you'll have to return to my scabbard first," Gahan faintly said to Qingpin. Qingpin stuck out his tongue and obediently entered Gahan's infant pouch. "Lord, you're really bold. This old man admires you." The old man expressed his admiration twice and chuckled. "I believe that Lord must have a lot of questions." Then, allow this old man to slowly answer Lord. This old man's surname is Nya. First name Feng Bo. First name Yuanda. My ancestral home is Fengyang, Anhui Province. I've lived for 60 years in vain. I made a fool of myself in front of Lord. The old man first introduced himself. However, this seemingly simple self-introduction allowed Gahan to hear a lot of hidden meanings in the words. First of all, this old man actually had words. 1 surname, 2 given names, and 3 characters were the naming characteristics of Huaxia in the Middle Ages. However, in the modern age, characters gradually disappeared, and Huaxia people only had their given names and surnames. This was something that many Chinese didn't know before the apocalypse. After the apocalypse, words completely disappeared from Chinese customs. Only people like Gahan, who had a deep understanding of history and culture, knew the meaning of words. Also, if you caught 1,000 people in Yanjing City and asked them what it meant to live a 60-year cycle, I'm afraid that not a single one of these 1,000 people would be able to answer the true meaning of 60-year cycle. The so-called Jiazi referred to a reincarnation cycle in the ancient Chinese calendar. Starting from the year of Jiazi, the following years were divided into the year of Ichou, year of Bingyin, year of Dingmao, year of Wuchen, year of Jiasai, year of Jingwu, year of Jiawu, year of Wuxiu, year of Xinhai, year of Guihai. I believe that everyone can filter out the years of Jiawu, year of Wuxiu, and year of Xinhai, which represented the naval battle of Jiawu, year of Wuxiu, year of Xinhai, year of Xinhai, year of Jiawu, year of Wuxiu, year of Xinhai, and year of Guihai. In total, there was a reincarnation cycle of 60 years. The Jiazi could also be used to express age. One Jiazi referred to a reincarnation cycle of the Jiazi calendar, which was 60 years. This old man said that he had lived a 60-year cycle in vain, which meant that he was currently 60 years old. For the sparse white hair on his temples, he seemed to be at least 80 years old at first glance. Unexpectedly, he was only 60 years old. He really aged quickly. From this old man, called Nie Fengbo, he knew the meaning of words, and could also use 60 years to describe his own age. This meant that this old man had a very clear understanding of the history and culture before the apocalypse. This was something that humans living in large cities had almost forgotten. However, in a world that was isolated from the rest of the world and where most humans were walking corpses, there was only one explanation for this old man's clear knowledge of so much history and culture. The humans here had come to this dimensional rift before the cultural destruction because only humans from before the cultural destruction could preserve so much historical and cultural knowledge in this barren world. At the thought of this, Gahan felt some anticipation. If these humans had really come here before the cultural destruction, they might be able to preserve a lot of historical and cultural information. In that case, they might be able to preserve many historical and cultural materials from before the Great Cultural Collapse. They might even be able to find the novel that contained information about the Qingping sword that Gu Han urgently needed. Gahan, who was filled with anticipation, didn't interrupt and allowed Nie Fengbo to continue narrating. In 2051 AD, which is more than 950 years ago, our ancestors had been hiding in an underground air raid shelter in North Korea. This hiding lasted for more than 50 years. Later, the food reserves in the air raid shelter were almost depleted. Our ancestors, who were hiding underground, could only take the risk and climb out of the air raid shelter in an attempt to find food outside. However, our ancestors were unlucky. The moment they came out, they encountered the battle between the Qilin and the black tortoise. The Qilin and the black tortoise were both sacred beasts of the human world. A casual strike from these two sacred beasts could shatter an entire mountain. Almost all of our ancestors who came out to adventure died tragically under the attacks of the Qilin and the black tortoise. Only the 7 of us survived. They fled all the way and finally escaped into a cave. There, they discovered this mystical world and finally settled down in this world. In the beginning, life in this world was pleasant. There was water, grassland, and some animals that our ancestors brought over. Thus, the 7 of us slowly multiplied. Later on, the goddess who lived in Daming Lake also accidentally entered this world. However, everyone lived very harmoniously with the gods and were very happy. Just like that, after more than 100 years, under the efforts of the 7 ancestors, they formed a tribe of over 1,000 people. Just when the ancestors thought that they could live peacefully here, an accident happened. Hearing Nie Fengbo's words, Gahan couldn't help but have an urge to ridicule. From 7 to 1,150 years, this was equivalent to the population doubling every 15 years. Perhaps the lives of the survivors here were really dull. Apart from asterisk, 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 there wasn't any entertainment. That was why they were able to satisfy such a high intensity of population growth. Of course, there was something even more interesting. Even if the 7 ancestors were a combination of 3 men and 4 women, or 4 women and 3 men without any blood relations, when they started multiplying, no matter how meticulous the calculations were, it was inevitable that there would be siblings or cousins. Thus, it seemed that the entire Radiant City was the product of close relatives. Of course, in such a critical moment, the reproduction of humans became the most important thing. As for ethics and blood relations, they could be temporarily tossed aside. After all, according to the legends of humans, all humans relied on Yuan and Fushi to reproduce, and all humans were also the product of inbreeding. Although he wanted to ridicule in his heart, Gohan chose to keep his mouth shut and listen to Nyefumwa's narration. Our ancestors will always remember that day. 2 demons suddenly tore through the sky of this world and crashed into the Norland prairie. The dust they raised covered the entire world, and the sky was covered in haze for an entire month. After a month, when everything calmed down, the 2 fireballs completely disappeared, leaving only 2 huge pits in the Norland prairie. But from that day onwards, this world underwent a monstrous change. The land that was originally able to grow fertile rice gradually began to change, and the land began to become worthless. Apart from weeds, no other crop seeds could grow in it. After a few days, when the seeds were dug out, they discovered that they had turned into hard stones. At first, only the land near the 2 pits underwent this change. But gradually, like a contagious disease, with the pits as the center, the rest of the land gradually became unfarmable. Our ancestors began to fear and prayed to the gods day and night, hoping to heal the scars of the land. But it was to no avail. When more than half of the land in this world could not be farmed, another 3 gods invaded this world. These 3 gods launched an unparalleled battle, and in the end, one of them was sealed under the earth, while the other 2 were seriously injured. They were rescued by us humans and arranged for them to recuperate in the tribe. After the injuries of the gods were healed, our ancestors offered their most precious possessions and knelt in front of the gods, hoping that the gods could save the damaged land and make it suitable for humans to farm again. The gods accepted our request, and the 2 gods went to investigate the 2 huge pits. They told us that there were 2 most terrifying demons hidden in the deep pits, and that these 2 demons could completely destroy the entire world with just a puff of air. Fortunately, these 2 demons had sealed each other, and even after tens of thousands of years, they wouldn't be able to break out of the seal, so we didn't have to worry about these demons hurting us for the time being. However, these 2 demons were simply too powerful. Just a bit of their aura was enough to pollute the entire land, and gradually, all of the land would become unfarmable. As such, the gods advised us to escape from this space. There were already very safe cities built by our compatriots outside, and as long as we could enter those cities, we would be able to live a stable and peaceful life. Unfortunately, our ancestors were so frightened by the outside world that they didn't dare to leave this safe place and still chose to live here. At the same time, the gods began to summon this huge radiant amusement park in the place where the other god was suppressed, and told us that this amusement park could use the power of the gods to create fragrant powder in the air, and then taught us a set of chi channeling method. As long as we keep practicing this set of chi channeling method, we can transform the fragrant powder in the air into the energy needed by our bodies, and we can continue to survive even without relying on food. But there's a price to pay. The price is that humans who have been using the fragrant powder for a long time will lose their emotions and humanity, and can only rely on the last animal instinct to survive. With Nyefumwa's explanation, the history of this world gradually unfolded in front of Gohan. Chapter 9:31. Gohan noticed that in Nyefumwa's narration, there were a total of 6 gods. Among them, the first god to appear was the god in the bright moon lake. She appeared in the same era as the 7 ancestors of the Radiant City. Guhan knew that this god should be referring to the ship girl, Serene. She was left in this world about 50 years after the apocalypse, which happened to be the period when Kinzu was active, which corresponded to the time of the 7 ancestors. Plus, she lived in the bright moon lake, so this god must be the ship girl, Serene. And the 3 gods that appeared later should refer to Gilgamesh, Artoria, and Yuan Ko, whose name Guhan didn't know. The latter worked together to seal the former, and then built the Radiant Amusement Park, which also corresponded. The only thing that Guhan didn't know was the 2 gods that caused the land of this world to be polluted. These 2 so-called gods also seemed to be Yuan Ko, and their power should be above the peak universe level Yuan Ko, like Artoria and Gilgamesh. It was very likely that they were flood level or desolate level Yuan Ko. After experiencing the battle with Gilgamesh, Guhan didn't want to fight with the flood level and desolate level Yuan Ko again. At that time, there wouldn't be a second Kinzu to save him, since Artoria told them that the seal between the 2 could still last for a long time. Guhan could also temporarily relax. At this time, what Guhan should do was to quickly increase his strength, find his own spirit sword level sword mistress as soon as possible, and let himself become a spirit sword level sword mistress. Unfortunately, this would be at least 3 years later, because Shanghai Pass does not allow the existence of spirit sword level sword mistress. In the following narration of the old man, Guhan's understanding of the Radiant City deepened. According to the old man, in the 10th year of the Radiant Amusement Park's construction, all the land was completely polluted. However, the land in Radiant's Amusement Park was not polluted. Radiant's Amusement Park used a power called the Red Maple Kingdom to protect the land. Therefore, there was a plot of land in the amusement park that could grow normal crops. However, the crops produced by this plot of land were only enough to feed Yuan Ko in the amusement park. There was no way it could supply all the humans. Later, as the days passed, a large number of people became stupid because they had been eating the fragrant powder in the air for a long time. Their lifespan also began to shorten rapidly, and if they maintained a state of stupidity for more than 10 years, their entire brain would completely die and they would become a true vegetable. Therefore, Guanghui Amusement Park opened its amusement facilities to the humans. After a single ride on the amusement facilities, the humans could regain a little bit of their basic sanity and avoid the danger of brain necrosis. Therefore, the humans here had to go to Guanghui Amusement Park once every 10 years. Otherwise, they would die without a doubt. However, it was unknown whether one should be happy or sad. As long as one practiced this method of qi circulation for a long time and inhaled the fragrant powder in the air, even a newborn baby would learn this method of qi circulation in the womb and be able to rely on the fragrant powder in the air to survive. After giving birth, the mother would also be able to regain her sanity in a short period of time and take care of her child for a few months before returning to the state of a walking corpse. This also ensured that the humans in the Radiant City could continue on, growing from a little over 1,000 people when Guanghui Amusement Park was first established to the current population of 300,000. However, this was undoubtedly a sad thing for the humans in the Radiant City, because they only live for the sake of living. Apart from that, they couldn't enjoy any happiness. To them, living like this was no different from dying. When all the humans were about to lose their sanity, the elders of the human tribes felt that they couldn't all become walking corpses. At the very least, there must be a line of people who understood. He was responsible for organizing and recording the history of the entire Radiant City. If it was possible in the future, he wanted to find a way to save all the humans. Therefore, after praying to the gods of Guanghui Amusement Park agreed to provide enough food for one person, ensuring that the Radiant City was a human civilization that could continue on. This was also the reason why Nie Fengbo could maintain his sanity. He was the inheritor of the entire Radiant City, the only human living on normal food. Nie Fengbo's line of inheritance had been passed down for over 700 years. However, His inheritance didn't rely on his bloodline. Niefengbo felt that he was reaching the age where he needed to find a new inheritor. Therefore, he would search among the newborn babies in the Radiant City. Once he found an intelligent baby, he would take him in as his disciple and continue on as an inheritor. Because Guangwei Amusement Park only provided food for one person, it was impossible for there to be two inheritors in their prime at the same time. Niefengbo could only find a newborn baby when he was old and weak, and his appetite declined. Then, he would teach him for a dozen years. Because the appetite of the old man and the baby was small, the two of them could barely survive on food for one person. I originally went to look for a new inheritor, but I didn't expect to meet you, Lord. Moreover, I just happened to meet this intelligent little girl, 2303. If Lord doesn't mind, I can take this little girl in as my disciple and let her shoulder the mission of my Radiant City's inheritor. Niefengbo said as he rubbed 2303's head. That's for the best. Gohan nodded to Niefengbo. This was the best outcome. Not only could he let this little girl survive, but he could also guarantee her intelligence and humanity. This made Gohan feel as if there was a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Lord, I pretty much told you everything. Then, may I ask you a few questions? Niefengbo said with a trembling voice. Of course, I'm more than happy to. Gohan replied. First, I want to confirm something with Lord. You came from the outside world, right? Niefengbo's murky eyes revealed a hopeful expression. Evidently, he really hoped that Gohan could give him a definite answer. Yes, we really came from the outside world. Gohan nodded. He knew what Niefengbo wanted to ask him, so he very straightforwardly explained the situation of the outside world to him. For example, the so-called gods were not gods, but Yuan-ko who destroyed the world. The humans and Yuan-ko had waged a 1,000-year war, which ultimately formed 8 headquarter cities. The war between humans and Yuan-ko was still ongoing. The humans could only ensure the safety of the headquarter cities. The other regions were still under Yuan-ko's control, and so on. Gohan's words were concise and comprehensive. Very quickly, he told Niefengbo about the general situation of the world. However, what made Gohan feel a little strange was that Niefengbo didn't reveal a joyful expression after listening to Gohan's narration. On the contrary, he became abnormally silent. This was a very illogical matter. Since Gohan told Niefengbo that there was an absolutely safe human city outside, then Niefengbo should obviously beg Gohan to think of a way to bring the 300,000 people from the Radiant City to the headquarters cities. Although the journey to the headquarters cities was a little dangerous, and there was a possibility of losing more than 2/3 of the population along the way. But compared to staying in this world as a walking corpse, it was worth a gamble to risk a 1/3 chance of becoming a real human. If Gohan was Niefengbo, Gohan would definitely be impatient to beg him to bring the humans from the Radiant City out. He would be able to eat the food that a normal person could eat and live as a normal person once again. However, the strange thing was that not only did Niefengbo not beg Gohan, but he also maintained a long silence, as if he was thinking about something. When Niefengbo woke up from his thoughts, he didn't mention the outside world at all, as if the outside world had no attraction to him. This Niefengbo is probably hiding something important from me. Gohan saw through Niefengbo's thoughts with a glance. However, since Niefengbo didn't want to bring the humans out, Gohan was also happy to let it be. Because once the humans here were brought away, the Radiant Amusement Park would definitely be exposed to the eyes of humans. According to the irreconcilable relationship between humans and Yuan-ko, the Yuan-ko here would most likely die in the hands of human sword-bearers. Gohan would personally take care of other Yuan-ko, but this was the home of the Black Tortoise, the place where the Black Tortoise was born and raised, and the amusement park that Artoria had painstakingly built. In addition, the Yuan-ko here had never offended humans, and his hands had not been stained with human blood for hundreds of years. Therefore, Gohan didn't want to see this place destroyed. Apart from this thought, Gohan actually had another thought hidden in his heart. It was just that this thought sounded like a fantasy, so Gohan had never told anyone about it. He just hid it deep in his heart. When Gahan felt that he had enough strength, he would realize his grand plan. To Gahan's plan, the 300,000 people here were like a gift from the heavens. With these 300,000 people, Gahan's plan would be able to solve a huge problem. Therefore, Gahan was more willing to let these 300,000 people stay in the Radiant City for the time being. When he needed them one day, he would personally bring these people out of the Radiant City. Right. I have another question. When your ancestors came to this place, did they bring any books with them? Or did anyone write their life's experiences in a diary or memoir? At the very least, as a human legatee, you should have inherited a lot of history and culture, right? Guhan said, with some anticipation. Of course. After all, legatees are used to pass on our history and culture. Although Niefengbois was a little surprised and didn't know why Gahan was asking him about this, he still stood up and silently walked to the door of a room behind him. He took out a key and opened the door. Through the door, Gahan could clearly see that there were more than 10 bookshelves in the room, and the bookshelves were filled with all kinds of books. Chapter 9:32. That's strange. There are tens of millions of people out there, and there are countless super-large libraries with tens of millions of books. Why are you interested in my small library? Niefengbois asked curiously as he led Gahan into the library. Since ancient times, humans have been the smartest and the stupidest. Gahan's answer made Niefengbois a little confused. Niefengbois decided not to think about it. He led Gahan into the library, pointed to the outermost rows of bookshelves, and said, "These are some notes recorded by our inheritors. However, most of them record the stories that happened after we hid in this world. Because all humans are stupid, even if 10 years have passed, there is often nothing worth recording. Therefore, the records here are quite boring. You can take a look if you want, sir. These are the records of our ancestors' knowledge before we entered this world. Some of them are books from before the apocalypse and some electronic documents. The other major part is the oral narration of our ancestors. When they grow old, they love to tell stories of the past to their descendants. Our descendants recorded these stories and wrote them into this complete set of the new Analects of Confucius." Niefengbois explained most of the books in the library to him. "Okay, leave me here alone. You don't have to stay here and be tired," Gahan said lightly. Niefengbois smiled and walked out of the library obediently, leaving Gahan alone inside. Gahan first flipped through the historical records after the apocalypse recorded by the inheritors. Gahan's reading speed was extremely fast. It only took him about 10 minutes to roughly read through all the records on the entire bookshelf. He found that the whole thing was just like what Niefengbois said. The records were quite boring. Of course, Gahan also found some valuable things. For example, in the oldest manuscript, Gahan saw this description. After the two great gods led more than 50 gods to join the amusement park, the two gods finally decided to leave and look for an unknown place. Before the gods left, I had the honor of meeting the gods and asked them what would happen to poor humans like us after the gods left. Would we be retarded forever? The Great Aho god told me that our fate will not always be like this. In the distant future, there will be a day of redemption. Before that day comes, all we have to do is wait patiently. Since then, I have never seen the two gods return. I don't know when that day will come. I only hope that we humans can really wait for that day to come." This was all that Gahan was interested in. First of all, the latter used her to describe the two gods. So in addition to Artoria, the other Yuan-ko should also be a woman. The word ahog in the record immediately reminded Gahan of Artoria's erect ahog. It seemed that the Yuan-ko who spoke at the end was Artoria. The last and most important point was that Artoria and the last Yuan-ko had left the Radiant Amusement Park. The last place they disappeared was not here. After all, the Gahan of Amusement Park was built more than 700 years ago, but Artoria was something that happened more than 300 years ago. But at the same time, there was a new problem. After Artoria discovered the dimensional rift more than 700 years ago, not only did she not harm the humans here, but she also helped them to live here. Obviously, Artoria's heart still maintained a clear mind more than 700 years ago and was not controlled by filth. But in the 300 years after that, until her final betrayal, Artoria's hands were stained with human blood. She had killed more than 10,000 humans and more than 100 sword-bearers. She was a world of difference from the benevolent god in the records. Did this mean that Artoria was polluted by filth again after leaving the Gahan of Amusement Park? There was also the problem of Goo Black Tortoise. Goo Black Tortoise was obviously his and Artoria's child, but when was the seed of this child sown? According to Goo Black Tortoise, her life was like that of a normal human child. It took her 18 years to grow from a baby who could not remember anything to the age of 18. When Goo Black Tortoise was young, she and Qingpin had squeezed into the same room for a few months. But now, Goo Black Tortoise had traveled back to the age of destruction. Gahan felt that the timeline was a complete mess when it came to Goo Black Tortoise. How many threads of time were entwined around him? Goo Black Tortoise, Qingpin, Artoria, and I Ching. Even Gahan had a headache just thinking about how many threads of time were entwined around him. Goo Black Tortoise, Qingpin, Artoria, and I Ching. Well, putting aside the matter of time for the time being, Gahan turned his attention to the precious information that had been preserved before the Age of Destruction. First, Gahan browsed through the books that the humans here had shamelessly called the New Analects of Confucius. This was actually a story told by the 7 ancestors recorded by later generations. It was not on the same level as the Analects of Confucius left behind by that sage. At most, it could be considered an interesting book. Because he was a storyteller, the New Analects of Confucius was not boring at all. On the contrary, it was full of interest and many stories that Gahan had never heard before. For example, there was a story in which a country called Italy participated in a war called World War II. But the soldiers of this country were very interesting. First, a group of soldiers from this country got hungry during the march, so the whole army stopped to cook spaghetti to eat. As a result, because they were not allowed to do anything else while eating spaghetti, the entire army of 10,000 soldiers was captured by a small group of 25 French soldiers. Then, the 25 French soldiers escorted the 10,000 Italian soldiers to the prison camp. Due to a lack of manpower and their unfamiliarity with the terrain, about 2,000 Italian prisoners were separated from the main army. Just when the French soldiers thought that the prisoners would definitely escape, the prisoners finally found them and said that they should have the honor of being prisoners. In the end, the Italian prisoners were imprisoned in the prison camp. After a while, the extremely obedient Italian prisoners actually escaped from the prison. However, they did not escape from the prison to live, but to escape to another prison camp. They heard that the prison camp provided spaghetti as a meal. In other words, they escaped just to change the taste of their food. There is also a story about a great general and leader of North Korea holding a press conference, announcing that North Korea had successfully built a spacecraft to land on the sun. Soon, North Korean astronauts will be able to land on the sun and send back some selfies. The foreign reporter asked the general curiously, "The temperature on the sun is so high. How are you going to land on the sun?" At this time, the general looked at the foreign reporter with disdain. "Are you stupid? We can land on the sun at night." The audience instantly burst into thunderous applause. There were many other interesting stories like this, and even Gahan couldn't help but laugh out loud. Of course, it could also be seen from these ridiculous materials that most of the stories recorded in the New Analects of Confucius were absurd. However, it was undeniable that there was also some very important information in it. For example, it was the first time that Gahan had completely sorted out the layout of the dynasties of Huaxia from these materials. Some people insisted that the Sui dynasty did not exist. The founding emperor of the Tang dynasty, Li Yuan, was the illegitimate son of Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty. Therefore, the Tang dynasty and the Sui dynasty were actually the same dynasty. The evidence was a novel called Romance of the Sui and Tang Dynasties. The Sui and Tang dynasties were connected together to mean that they were the same dynasty. The reason why Gahan could be sure of this was that the entire story of the Romance of the Sui and Tang dynasties was recorded in the New Analects of Confucius. In addition, historical stories such as Legends of the Eastern Zhou Dynasty, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Chuhan's Struggle for Hegemony, Legend of the Heroes of the Ming Dynasty, Legend of the Heroes of the Song Dynasty, and so on were all recorded in this way. According to the self-description of one of the ancestors, he was a fan of storytelling. These were all the contents that he had recorded through storytelling. Anyway, through this New Analects of Confucius, Guhan's historical knowledge had improved greatly. To put it bluntly, he had surpassed most of the historians in the world. After reading the New Analects of Confucius, Guhan couldn't wait to turn his attention to the well-preserved books from before the apocalypse. These were all books from before the apocalypse, and any one of them could easily fetch a price of millions in an auction in a base city. Unfortunately, when Guhan opened these books, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. This was because these books were all one lesson, one practice, 3 years of college entrance examination, 5 years of simulation, and Huanggong's secret scroll. It seemed that the person who kept these books should be a candidate preparing to take the college entrance examination and a candidate preparing to take the science exam. Otherwise, there should at least be some reference books like history, geography, and politics in these reference books. In the end, after rummaging through the entire library, Guhan did not find any information related to the Qingping sword at all. However, this was also within Guhan's expectations. As the saying goes, the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks. Sooner or later, one would know the truth about the Qingping sword. However, in fact, there was still a piece of information in the library that had not been looked up yet. It was a small black chip the size of a fingernail on the last bookshelf. Guhan recognized this chip. It was said that this was a TF card hidden in a mobile phone. It could record a lot of electronic records, and he might be able to find some useful knowledge. Unfortunately, Guhan did not have a machine that could read this TF card. Therefore, Guhan took this TF card out and proposed to Niefengbua that he could take this TF card away and bring it back to the human world for interpretation. It was obvious that Niefengbua was very hesitant about Guhan's request. He did not want Guhan to take such a precious thing away. However, he did not dare to directly reject Guhan. After all, Guhan was a powerhouse with strength comparable to a god. If he disobeyed him, he was afraid that only death would await him. These things are for you. Guhan saw Niefengbua's hesitation. Then, Guhan took out all the dry food that could be stored for a long time from his dimensional pocket and placed it in front of Niefengbua. This is enough food for you to eat for a lifetime. I will use it to rent this TF card. I promise that I will return here within 10 years and then return this TF card to you, Guhan said solemnly. Okay then. Niefengbua swallowed his saliva and finally nodded in agreement. I didn't expect sect leader Tongtian's Qingping sword to actually be in the hands of this lord. Could it be that the time for our radiant city to be freed from this damned fate has finally arrived? Niefengbua stared at Guhan's departing figure. Hey, little girl, from today onwards, the two of us will depend on each other. Niefengbua touched the little head of 2303, who was constantly waving her hands in an attempt to make Guhan stay. Right, the name 2303 is no longer suitable for you. Let this old man give you a new name according to the rules passed down by our ancestors. You live in the eastern part of the city. The eastern part of the city is filled with the descendants of the Yi clan, one of the 7 ancestors. Since you are so close to this Lord Guhan, and he has the Qingping sword in his hands, then from today onwards, you will treat Yi Qingping well. Fengbua shakes Qingping. Ha! Good name, good name. Niefengbua laughed happily and raised Yi Qingping high. This little lowly finally had her own real name. Chapter 9:33. My brother military governor, Mrs. Shima has been back for a day. Why are you only back now? I thought you were captured by the Wu people, and they were going to mobilize the entire Tying Star garrison to rescue you. Yao Wang said as he put his arm around Guhan's shoulder. As for what he said about mobilizing the entire Tying Star garrison to save Guhan, it was basically bullsh*t. Even when Ashima's fate was unknown, Yao Wang dared to mobilize the entire Tying Star garrison, let alone for Gahan. Come, tell me, where did you find Miss Ashima? How did you save her? Yao Wang asked curiously. Didn't Ashima write a report and hand it in? You can read the report yourself. There's no need to ask me. Gahan said coldly. The so-called report was, of course, a report that Gahan, Ashima, and Liu Ling had agreed to write. The content was the same. Gahan found Ashima, who was being hunted by the Wu people in North Korea. Then, Gahan and the Wu people started a huge battle. However, they did not expect to attract the Wu people's great shaman, Xingtian. Gahan could not defeat Xingtian, so he could only escape with Ashima and ask Liu Ling for help. Liu Ling rushed over at the critical moment and fought off Xingtian. She protected Ashima and left first. Gahan continued to search the North Korean area and only returned a day later when he couldn't find any other survivors. It was a seemingly flawless report. It was a very complete fabrication. You can fool others with a report like this, but you can't fool me, Yao Wang. Yao Wang suddenly became serious. It's fine if you don't want to tell me the truth. You just need to tell me if the truth is a threat to the safety of Shan Haiguan. Whether you believe it or not, this is the truth. Of course, Gahan would not be fooled by Yao Wang's shoddy lies. He insisted that the report was the truth. Since it had Liu Ling's signature, Yao Wang could only admit the report with a bitter smile, even if he did not believe it. He then patted Gahan's shoulder. All right, I give up. Your rewards have been issued. Go and collect them. The so-called rewards were the quest to find Ashima that Yao Wang had issued. As long as he successfully found Ashima, Gahan would receive 10 million renminbi, 1 million hero coins, and 500,000 merit points as a reward. 10 million renminbi was just a change in the numbers in Gahan's account. What Gahan really cared about was the 1 million hero coins and 500,000 merit points. In the Bay City's sword-bearer shop, a full set of sword scar imprints cost about 500,000 hero coins. The hero shop in Shan Haiguan was actually cheaper than the hero shop in the Bay City. It only cost 450,000 to buy a full set of sword scar imprints. A full set of sword scar imprints was required to raise a famed sword maiden to grade 1. It was obviously impossible for Gahan to raise Qi Dian or Juzi to grade 1. However, Gahan could raise the past water sword to grade 1. Not to mention the strange relationship between Shi Shui and Gahan. The value of an ancient sword maiden to grade 1 did not mean much to Gahan. Gahan calculated. If he could raise both sword scar imprints, then 1 million hero coins could raise both Qi Dian and Juzi to grade 3. However, if he gave all of them to one of the sword maidens, then one of them could be raised to grade 2. Not only could sword scar imprints activate the sword maiden's skills, but it could also increase the sword maiden's basic attributes by 10% for every additional grade. A grade 3 sword maiden was equivalent to 8 times the attributes of a normal sword maiden. A grade 2 sword maiden was equivalent to 1 times the attributes of a normal sword maiden. Although a grade 2 sword maiden's abilities were much better than a grade 3 sword maiden's, it could not activate one more of its basic skills. When considering the use of the yin-yang sword technique, the attributes of 2 grade 3 sword maidens added together were clearly stronger than a grade 2 sword maiden and a grade 9 sword maiden. After a short period of consideration, Gahan used these hero coins to exchange for a sword scar imprint that could raise both Qi Dian and Juzi swords to grade 3. This way, Gahan would be left with more than 600,000 hero coins in his hands. On the other hand, it was a little awkward for Gahan to have 500,000 merit points. Because the new sword-bearers had yet to enter Shanghai Pass, the sword-bearers above Gahan were all elite sword-bearers who had survived through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. These sword-bearers had participated in the bitter resistance 5 days ago, and each of them had obtained more than 300,000 hero points on average. Including the hero points they had obtained before, almost all of them had more hero points than Gahan. Therefore, Gahan could only continue to stay in the Shi-Sing garrison. However, apart from having a bad name, there were no other disadvantages to this *T Star Guardian mansion. Gahan did not care about this. After purchasing the sword mark he needed, he returned to the T-Star Guardian mansion that he had been away from for a few days. When Ku-Rakin and Leslie Dracula saw that Gohan had returned, they immediately contacted Gohan. After chatting with him for a while, Gohan returned to his lonely state. However, at least Gohan could not sleep that night, because the entire Shi-Sing garrison was immersed in endless screams. Unexpectedly, the Chi-Dian sword, which usually looked strong and proud, was weaker than Douyu when it came to the sword scar imprint. It was only slightly stronger than Qingpin. Although the deep sword wound was extremely painful, a little lowly like Douyu could only shed tears and sob softly. She only let out a cry when the sword was stabbed into her body due to the immense pain. For the rest of the time, she behaved like a little adult and was very strong. However, Chi-Dian was different. Chi-Dian could be said to be the first sword maiden that Zhang Heng had. However, due to the separation between the game and reality, it was not Chi-Dian's turn to carve the sword scar imprint. In other words, this was the first time Chi-Dian experienced the pain of a sword scar imprint. Logically speaking, this should not be the first time. When Chi-Dian was the Yu King Go Jian, she had experienced many sword bearers and had experienced the sword scar imprint with them. Logically speaking, she should have gotten used to it by now. However, when Gohan started to carve the sword scar imprint, Chi-Dian screamed like a ghost. Her screams were much more miserable than Qingpin's. Fortunately, although Chi-Dian screamed miserably, her self-control was much stronger than Qingpin's. Therefore, Chi-Dian did not cause trouble for Gohan during the sword scar imprint. She only screamed too miserably. When he finally finished carving the sword mark deeply, Gohan immediately hugged Chi-Dian in his arms and silently soothed her trembling skin. Only then did Chi-Dian calm down a little. Is it very painful? Although Gohan's words were simple, they contained a strong sense of concern. And Chi-Dian jumped into Gohan's arms and nodded slightly. Then how did you get here in the past? Have you never had a deep sword scar before? Gohan asked with a smile. Before what before? Chi-Dian's answer was a little absent-minded. I've almost forgotten everything in the past. Ever since I changed into this body, I've become more forgetful than before. Other than the fact that my first sword wielder was Kenzu and that I used to be the king of you, Go Jian, I don't have any other memories. Therefore, this sword scar is equivalent to the first deep sword scar in my life. It's good that you forgot. It was best to forget everything that had happened in the past. You are now a brand new sword maiden. Gohan patted King Yu's shoulder. It's already 3 in the morning. You're screaming so miserably. You should rest early. No. Chi-Dian suddenly jumped out of Gohan's arms and pressed Gohan down on the bed. She used a sticky tone and said coquettishly, No, I don't know what's going on. I have a special feeling right now. You should at least satisfy me first. With that, Chi-Dian violently pulled apart Gohan's clothes and pounced on Gohan's naked chest. She picked up the pea in front of Gohan's chest and started sucking on it. What's going on? Chi-Dian is much more active than before. This is the first time she took the initiative to do something like this. Could it be that Chi-Dian is actually some kind of strange physique, the type that gets more excited the more painful it is? Gohan didn't have much time to think as Chi-Dian's movements became more and more intense. Her palms even started to move downwards, grabbing towards Gohan's vital parts. Is it fun to do this? A voice suddenly rang out in the room, causing Chi-Dian to jump up from Gohan's body. She turned around and saw Juzi, who looked exactly like her, looking at her coldly and curiously. Juzi, why are you here? Chi-Dian asked anxiously. Master said that he wanted to have a deep sword scar with me, so I've been waiting here. Is there a problem? Juzi asked word by word, leaving Chi-Dian speechless. It was indeed Gohan who pulled the two of them in, saying that they would complete the mission in one night. However, Juzi was too quiet. At the same time, the pain from the deep sword scar made Chi-Dian neglect many things. As a result, she forgot about Juzi and prepared to have a live erotic session with Gohan in front of Juzi. Juzi, come here. It's your turn to make a deep sword scar. Gohan resolved the awkwardness in time. He pulled Juzi to his bed and began the process of making a deep sword scar on Juzi. Qi stood at the side thoughtfully and supervised the whole process of Juzi's deep sword scar. It was surprised that the deep sword scar looked like this from a bystander's point of view. On the other hand, Juzi was extremely ashamed. This was because Juzi didn't utter a single word throughout the entire process. She didn't even let out a single tear or groan, let alone scream. However, Qi had a feeling that this wasn't a good thing. A sword mistress should at least have enough emotions. If a sword mistress didn't even moan in such great pain like Juzi, then this sword mistress was in too much pain. Chapter 9:34. When Guhan opened his eyes the next morning, he discovered that he was hugging two identical, beautiful sword maidens in each of his arms. This is Qi. Guhan looked at the sword lady on the left. This is Juzi. Guhan looked at the sword lady on the right. After Qi was reborn, it and Juzi were like twins, as if they were carved from the same mold. Usually, Guhan could only judge them based on the different colors of their clothes. Qi was wearing golden clothes, while Juzi was wearing black clothes. But now, because these two sword ladies had been making deep sword scars for the whole night, their clothes were already scattered on the ground. Two naked bodies were lying in Guhan's arms, fast asleep. If these two sword ladies spoke, Guhan might be able to judge their identity from their tone of voice. But unfortunately, both of them were in a deep sleep. They had the same delicate face, the same skin color, and even their opi was the same size. This made it difficult for Guhan to quickly judge which was Qi and which was Juzi. Well, it wasn't like there was no way. Guhan gently touched the opi of the sword lady on the left, and then the opi of the sword lady on the right. Then, he quickly determined that the one on the left was Qi and the one on the right was Juzi. The reason was very simple. Qi's body had already been developed by Guhan, and the pair of opi had become very soft under Guhan's careful care. However, Juzi was still a virgin, so her opi was relatively firm, and it felt a little hard when he pinched it. To make an analogy, Qi's opi was like a soft orange. On the other hand, Juzi's opi was like a hard apple. That was the difference in the texture. After distinguishing the sword ladies, Guhan didn't continue to fiddle with their perverted hobby of opi. Instead, he entered his consciousness into his purple palace and saw a surging river in his purple palace. This was a river completely composed of sword essence. For ancient sword wielders, the sword essence in their bodies was around 100 to 1,000 quarks. The sword essence in their purple palace was extremely sparse, and it was like stars hanging in various parts of the purple palace. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to sense their sword essence. At the treasure sword level, the sword essence in the body could barely condense into a small ditch. Moreover, the speed at which the sword essence flowed was very slow. However, one could clearly see the sword essence in their Zifu with their own consciousness. When one reached the level of a famed sword wielder, the sword essence in one's body would turn into a cheerful flowing stream, with water constantly splashing from the stream. But now, the sword essence in Guhan's Zifu had turned into a big river, just like the Yangtze River. This was a scene that could only be seen in the Zifu of a spirit sword wielder, which meant that the sword element in Guhan's Zifu had broken through 100,000 quarks. In fact, to be precise, Guhan currently had 430,000 quarks of sword element, which was considered to be at the middle level among spirit sword wielders. This was entirely due to the dedication of Gilgamesh. This was the generous contribution of a universe, level Yuan Ko. Guhan's Qidian sword was able to absorb a total of 800,000 quarks of sword element from his dimensional vortex, and then these 800,000 quarks of sword element were transformed into 420,000 quarks of sword element into Guhan's body. 430,000 quarks of sword element, coupled with Guhan's swordsmanship, it could be said that now, as long as Guhan was equipped with a spirit sword wielder, Guhan would become a spirit sword wielder. Then, Guhan would be able to easily defeat all the spirit sword wielders and become the number one person among the spirit sword wielders. My ass, number one person in the spirit sword level. I'm still too weak. Gohan instantly threw this idea to the back of his mind, and at the same time, burst into a bitter smile. Gohan could not help but recall his battle with Gilgamesh. In that battle, he was nothing more than a toy for Gilgamesh to toy with. Although Gilgamesh used absolute strength to suppress Gohan, Gohan actually had several opportunities to hit Gilgamesh. Unfortunately, Gohan did not see the location of Gilgamesh's dimensional node from the beginning to the end. Otherwise, Gohan could also borrow the characteristics of the Chidian sword and directly send Gilgamesh back to the dimensional vortex. However, even if he defeated Gilgamesh because of the dimensional node, it could not be considered as a righteous path. It was just that the characteristics of a Chidian sword were too awesome. In his heart, Gohan faintly hoped that he could defeat Gilgamesh with his swordsmanship. Originally, Gohan thought that under the absolute suppression of strength, no matter how excellent his swordsmanship was, it would be useless. However, it was not until Kinzu appeared and used the marvelous harmonious stream of flowing goblets that Gohan suddenly realized that swordsmanship was not completely useless under the absolute suppression of strength. Rather, it was because Gohan's swordsmanship was not high enough. He had not even reached 1/10 of the realm of the harmonious stream of flowing goblets. Gohan felt that if he could master the harmonious stream of flowing goblets, he would not be in such a difficult situation like before. He might even be able to maintain a 50-50 situation with Gilgamesh for a period of time. Under the circumstances of Green Lotus White Root Body and Yin Yang Sword Secret Art, Gohan was even confident that he could suppress Gilgamesh. As long as Gohan could suppress Gilgamesh, Gohan could find a way to find the dimensional node that Gilgamesh had hidden, and then send Gilgamesh home with one sword strike. This way, he would not need Kinzu to save him, and Gu Xuanwu would not be pushed back by Kinzu. Have I been too complacent during this period of time? Gohan carefully crawled up from his bed and turned to stare at the two soundly asleep sword ladies. He could not help but reflect in his heart. Did I think that my swordsmanship was already strong enough? Did I think that my swordsmanship was invincible in the world? Ever since I became a sword wielder, I seem to have become arrogant. I have been immersed in improving the essence of the sword or other external things, but I have neglected the swordsmanship that was the foundation of my life. The number of times I have practiced has not even reached a third of the time before I became a sword wielder. Other than creating a small portion of the chaos sword technique, I have not made any other improvements. I have really lost myself. Gohan fell into self-reflection. However, from a certain point of view, Gohan had been too harsh on himself. The reason why the number of times Gohan practiced his swordsmanship had decreased wasn't because he was slacking off, but because he had many more things to consider. In the past few months, Gohan had either been in a harsh battle or thinking about the chaotic timeline in an attempt to unravel the various mysteries surrounding him. Forget it, there wasn't much to explain. Gohan's swordsmanship training was indeed inferior to the past. No matter how righteous the reason was, it was the truth. No, I can't continue being so lazy. I have to return to the state of arduous training from before. Gohan clenched his fists and left his bedroom. When he passed by the other sword ladies' bedrooms, he realized that Qingpin and Douyu were still sleeping. Itian was nowhere to be seen, and only Shui was sitting quietly in her room, deep in thought. Do you have time? Gohan pushed open Shui's door and asked softly. Yes. Shui seemed surprised that Gohan would actually take the initiative to appear in her room. This was the first time Gohan had stayed with her in her room since she moved into the Guardian's mansion. I want to practice my swordsmanship. Can you help me? Gohan extended his hand to the past water sword. So you want to practice your swordsmanship with me? Shui smiled bitterly in her heart. It seemed that she had thought too much. To the entire team, she was still an extremely awkward existence. Sure, Shui replied calmly. She took the initiative to return the sword to Gohan's hand and changed back to its sword form. Gohan held the past water sword and came to the open space outside the Guardian's mansion. He began to practice the swordsmanship that he had mastered, from the 9 swords of mysterious heaven to the chaos swordsmanship, as well as some small routines that Guhan had figured out himself. Guhan practiced for a few hours. However, when Guhan finished practicing, he did not look happy. This was because Guhan realized that after practicing for a few hours, he realized that he had not improved at all. He was only repeating these movements mechanically. No, I can't continue practicing like this. It won't have any effect. Guhan stopped what he was doing when he thought of this. He took a deep breath to calm himself down and once again carefully thought about the problem of his swordsmanship. It seems that I was a little extreme just now. The reason why my swordsmanship cannot improve is not because I have neglected to practice, but because the 9 swords of mysterious heaven can only reach the limit of swordsmanship. Only a new and stronger swordsmanship can allow my swordsmanship to continue improving. Guhan changed his train of thought and immediately felt his vision brighten. At the same time, the harmonious stream of flowing goblets that Kenzu had used before flashed through Guhan's mind. Then, Guhan began to imitate Kenzu's sword. This imitation lasted for a full 7 to 8 hours. It was only when the entire world entered deep into the night that Guhan abruptly broke out of this state. Oh, Guhan suddenly let out a long howl that could shake the entire world. Then, his entire body suddenly turned into a stream of light and began to brandish his sword. Sword of the abyss, sword of slaughter, sword of the heavens, sword of tranquility, chaos splitting heavens. Guhan practiced from the 9 swords of mysterious heaven all the way to the chaos swordsmanship that he created. Originally, Guhan's chaos swordsmanship only had one ultimate move, chaos splitting heavens. Logically speaking, after using this move, Guhan's matter should end. However, Guhan's body was still brandishing his sword. Moreover, his swordsmanship gradually became like the starry sky. Although Guhan was clearly only the size of a person, his sword's momentum seemed to cover the entire starry sky. No matter where he was, he could be attacked by Guhan at any time. After practicing this move to the extreme, Guhan finally stopped. His clothes were already drenched in sweat. From now on, this move will be called Chaos Stars. Guhan gave a brand new name to the moves in his newly created Chaos swordsmanship. A satisfied smile finally appeared on Guhan's face. After creating the Chaos Stars, Guhan discovered that his swordsmanship was vaguely climbing to a higher level. If he could create the complete Chaos swordsmanship, then his swordsmanship would definitely reach a brand new peak. At that time, it would not be impossible for him to compete with Kenzu's swordsmanship. Chapter 935. After his breakthrough on the first day, Guhan felt powerless over the next few days. This was because Guhan realized that if he wanted to further improve his swordsmanship, he had to perfect the entire Chaos swordsmanship. However, after creating the Chaos Stars, Guhan discovered that he had used up all of his accumulated knowledge. He could not improve the Chaos sword style no matter how much he practiced. Guhan tried to recall the usage of the harmonious stream of flowing goblets from Kenzu, but it was a pity that the sword style gradually faded from Guhan's memory after he mastered the Chaos Stars. In the end, Guhan seemed to have completely forgotten how to use the sword style. Looks like I'll have to figure it out in actual combat. Guhan knew that he could no longer perfect the Chaos sword style by himself. Guhan decided to use his 200,000 achievement points to exchange for 40 days of vacation from the Tyene Star garrison. He then left the Shi Sing garrison with the past water sword in hand and ventured deep into the Wu people's territory with his sword maidens. A few days later, the Wu people were spreading a strange rumor. A human had barged into the Wu people's territory and had taken the initiative to provoke the Wu people's tribes. He fought against the intermediate sorcerers of the Wu people and defeated many of the elite intermediate sorcerers of the Wu people. Initially, there was no need for the rumor to spread. There was no shortage of fearless human swordsmen since ancient times, and such swordsmen would usually be able to act arrogantly for a while. However, when the Wu people's army surrounded the swordsmen, they could only choose to be surrounded and beaten to death. Of course, the swordsmen with the surname Lun Yen were an exception. However, according to the rumor, The audacious human did not command his sword maidens like the other swordsmen. Instead, he fought with the sword maidens in his hands. This was just a strange thing. What was even more strange was that when this human was fighting against the sorcerer tribe, he never used the power of the stars transformed from sword essences. He completely relied on his own body and sword techniques to fight against the sorcerer tribe. The strangest thing was that the sword bearer, a piece of trash without the power of the stars, had defeated over 100 intermediate sorcerer tribe warriors in a row. He had even slaughtered a small tribe under the Dejang tribe. Over 40 intermediate sorcerers in the tribe had all died. This completely shattered the worldview that the Wu people had built up over the centuries. Even the bloodline of the Lu Nian family could not do this. Was the swordsman really human? Of course, the sorcerer tribe would not allow themselves to be provoked like this. Hence, under the organization of a few sorcerers, almost all the sorcerer tribes in the area where the sword-bearer was active joined forces. The entire team was led by a heaven sorcerer, and together with hundreds of medium sorcerers and thousands of junior sorcerers, they launched an endless hunt for the damned human. Lord Heaven Wizard, we found a human target. Just now, a small troop of warriors reported seeing a human man eating on the Gray Iron Plain. He looks exactly like the human described, reported a warrior to the Heaven Wizard. Good. Your scouts will hide where they are. Do not attract this human's attention. Then, the Dejang warriors will surround him from the back, the Hotu warriors from the front, the Xianming warriors from the left, and the Gong warriors from the right. When all the warriors are in position, we will send this damned human to hell. Under the command of the Heaven Wizard, a tight encirclement was formed around Gahan. After the Heaven Wizard confirmed that the last possible escape route had been blocked by the Wu people's warriors, the Heaven Wizard probably felt that this human would not be able to escape. Thus, he ordered all the hidden Wu people's troops to show themselves and formally surround and kill this human. With the Heaven Wizard taking the lead, the Wu people's encirclement kept shrinking, and soon, Gohan was trapped in a small circle with a diameter of only a few meters. Outside the circle were all Wu people. As far as the eye could see, the end of the Wu people's troops could not be seen. However, in the Heaven Wizard's imagination, when his troops surrounded this human, he would either tremble in fear or yell at the Wu people crazily. This human would either tremble in fear or scream at the Wu people crazily to hide the fear in his heart or vent the madness in his heart. However, this human in front of him did not make a sound. His expression did not even change. He just watched as he was surrounded, as if he was not surrounded by thousands of Wu people, but by thousands of kittens. This made the Heaven Wizard angry, but also a little curious. He wondered why this human was so daring and so calm. Human, tell me your name. After the Wu people surrounded Gahan, they did not immediately attack him. Instead, they started to ask for Gahan's name like a battle between generals. My name? Gohan revealed a surprised expression. This was the first time his expression changed. Since when do you Wu people ask for your opponent's name before battle? I don't remember you people having this habit. Of course, we are not interested in knowing the name of an ordinary human. The Heaven Wizard raised his head proudly. But you're different. You can actually defeat so many powerful warriors without using that bullsh asterisk T-star power. With your strength, you already have the right to leave your name in the records of the shaman tribe. Once you die, we will follow the traditions of you humans and dig a hole for you. We will fill it with soil and finally erect a tombstone with your name on it. This can be considered a reward for your strength. Oh, should I thank you? Gohan looked at the Heaven Shaman with interest. That's right. Gohan's gaze made the Heaven Wizard very uncomfortable. He twisted his body uncomfortably. He then recalled Gohan's performance and asked curiously again, Human, you should have discovered our encirclement long ago, right? That's right. Gohan nodded. It's time for your scouts to lose some weight. Although they're lying on the ground, they're fat, but they're higher than the sky. How can I not see them? Then why didn't you escape? The Heaven Wizard was even more curious. With your strength, you should be able to escape before our encirclement is formed. Why should I escape? Gohan seemed to have heard something strange. Because only death awaits you if you don't escape. Tian Wu shouted in a stern voice. Only death awaits you. Only death awaits you. In order to match the Heaven Wizard's words, the surrounding Wu people raised their weapons at the same time and let out a roar. The roar of hundreds and thousands of Wu people seemed to be able to pierce through the sky. The entire world shook along with the roar. Ordinary people would have been scared out of their wits when they saw this scene. They might have even knelt down. Let me return those words to you. You are the ones who will die if you come here. Gohan was not frightened by this situation. Instead, he smiled indifferently. The Heaven Wizard was deeply provoked by Gohan's smile. He no longer had any interest in talking to Gohan. He raised his hand high and pressed it down. The impatient Wu people immediately rushed forward and fought with Gohan. The Heaven Wizard did not attack immediately. Instead, he hovered in the air and observed the battle silently. Very soon, the Heaven Wizard realized that things were just as the rumors said. This human did not use the power of the stars. He only relied on an ordinary sword mistress to fight the Wu people. In this situation, even the strongest sword mistress, the guardian of the sun or the moon, should have been torn to pieces by the frenzied Wu people. However, this was not the case. It was not this human who was being torn to pieces, but the powerful Wu people warriors. Although these warriors were all junior magi, even if they were junior magi, their strength was still a few times greater than that of ordinary human beings. More importantly, these warriors had a wealth of battle experience. After a long period of reincarnation, these warriors had honed their skills in close combat. Coupled with the fact that the sorcerer tribe was not afraid of death, they could often kill ancient sword bearers who had an advantage in terms of strength and were scared shitless. Besides, among these junior magi, there were some more powerful intermediate magi. Every intermediate magi's physical strength was a few times greater than a junior magi's, and every intermediate magi was able to exchange a few moves with a famous swordswoman. Before they set off, the Heaven Wizard saw the troops he led and felt that he might have made a mountain out of a molehill. The next human sword mistress would not need such a strong army. But when the battle really started, the Heaven Wizard began to regret not bringing more people with him. The fearless junior wizards were as weak as cabbages in a vegetable field under the sword of this human sword mistress. With a swing of a sword, 5 or 6 junior wizards were cut in half at the same time. They turned into blood essence and returned to Zhu Wu's blood essence. As for the intermediate warlocks, although the human was unable to kill them instantly, every time he attacked with his sword, he was extremely cunning, hitting the weakest parts of the intermediate warlocks. After 5 or 6 strikes, an intermediate warlock would die under the human's sword. What was even more infuriating was that the human's movements were extremely graceful. He was clearly being attacked by a few or even a dozen sorcerer tribe warriors at the same time, but his body was like the body of a snake, able to weave through the shadows of the swords. The attacks of the sorcerer tribe warriors could not even touch the human's body. Instead, because of a short moment of paralysis caused by the attacks, the human took their lives with a backhand. The Heaven Wizard only watched for a few dozen seconds before he felt that he could not watch any longer. Instead, he picked up his weapon and joined in the attack on Gohan. I won't kill you. Go. There were only 2 people left on the battlefield. One was Gohan, and the tip of his sword was pressed against his opponent's throat. The other was the Heaven Wizard who had just spoken to Gohan. Why? Why don't you kill me? Are you looking down on me? The Heaven Wizard was extremely angry that Gohan did not kill him. No, I just want you to pass a message for me. Gohan said calmly. What message? The Heaven Wizard asked subconsciously. Go tell your great wizard. Gohan looked at the messy battlefield around him. Don't send these useless witch tribe members to their deaths. They don't even have the right to train my sword skills. Chapter 9:36. When he saw that Heaven Witchcraft's figure gradually disappearing from his line of sight, Gohan was caught off guard and fell to the ground. Although Gohan had killed thousands of Wu people in an awe-inspiring manner and even captured the Heaven Wizard in the end, Gohan had actually exhausted his physical strength to the limit. However, Guhan had actually overdrawn his physical strength to the limit. Without using the power of the stars, it was already a miracle that Guhan was able to last until now. Not bad. The effect of this training is not bad. I have some ideas about the next steps of the chaos swordsmanship. After catching his breath, Guhan mumbled to himself helplessly. Although the battle just now had exhausted Guhan's physical strength, it had also allowed Guhan to have some ideas about the chaos swordsmanship. At the same time, Guhan also had new ideas about how to perfect this swordsmanship. I hope I'll meet a stronger opponent next time. The Wu people's encirclement on Guhan was still going on, but the Wu people's encirclement was getting bigger and bigger. This was also what Guhan was looking forward to. The second encirclement by the Wu people was much smarter. They directly abandoned the junior wizard Wu people. The top strength of the team had expanded to 10 heaven wizards. The core strength had become 300 intermediate wizards. It seemed to be 1/3 less than the first encirclement, but the actual combat strength had increased by more than 5 times. Therefore, the second encirclement ended with the victory of the Wu people. After fighting for more than 10 minutes and killing more than 50 intermediate wizards, Guhan was forced to exhaust all his physical strength by the heaven wizard. He knelt on one knee and could only use his sword to support his body. Just as the heaven wizard was about to end this damned human's life, Guhan suddenly took out a droplet flying ship and quickly escaped from the encirclement by the Wu people. Therefore, in the third encirclement, the Wu people brought the Wu people of the Dijiang tribe who were good at archery. They were ready to shoot down the damned vehicle when Guhan took out the droplet flying ship to escape. But it was useless. The surface of the droplet flying ship seemed to be made of some special material. The arrows of the Wu people didn't cause much damage to the droplet flying ship and couldn't stop it from escaping. What was worse was that Guhan only escaped after killing 100 intermediate wizards in the third encirclement. He killed twice as many intermediate wizards as he did in the second encirclement. Didn't this mean that Guhan's strength had doubled? This was proven during the fourth encirclement. This time, Guhan killed 150 intermediate wizards before escaping. Moreover, Guhan deliberately killed all the intermediate wizards of the Dijiang tribe before leaving in the droplet flying ship. Then came the fifth encirclement. After losing more than 300 intermediate wizards, the Wu people finally learned their lesson. They couldn't even bear to send their intermediate wizard warriors into the battlefield. They sent out a super team of 50 heaven wizards to engage in a battle with Guhan that lasted for half an hour. Apart from the 50 heaven wizards who fought Guhan directly, another 20 heaven wizards from the Gomong tribe cast a flight restriction spell and completely sealed off the airspace around the battlefield. This prevented Guhan from escaping using the droplet flying ship. In the eyes of these heaven wizards, Guhan was destined to be unable to escape this time. Unfortunately, reality still slapped them in the face. This time, Guhan didn't engage in a tug-of-war with them like he usually did. Instead, he used an explosive sword move that resembled starlight and killed 3 heaven wizards on the spot. Then, he took advantage of a gap in the encirclement to kill his way out. Then, he quickly killed a Gomong heaven wizard who was maintaining the flight restriction spell, causing it to lose its effectiveness. Then, he once again escaped the battlefield in the droplet flying ship. Then came the 6th, 7th, 8th. By the 12th time, the Wu people's expressions had changed at the mention of Guhan. The Wu people didn't even dare form a team to encircle and kill Guhan, because this fellow would definitely find a way to escape. Even more terrifying was that this human's sword technique seemed to improve after each encirclement. During the second encirclement, the 300 intermediate wizards were able to force Guhan to escape. However, during the 12th encirclement, the Magi had mobilized all the 300 heaven Magi they could muster to carry out the encirclement, but they still lost 5 heaven Magi. Then, they allowed Guhan to escape without any way to stop him. At that moment, the Wu people came to a realization. The fundamental goal of the other party's provocation wasn't to go crazy like a fool, but to use the Wu people to hone his sword technique. Although this discovery allowed the Wu people to discover the truth, It also made the Wu people feel disgusted, as though they had eaten a rat's feces. Since when did the Wu people, who could make the entire human race tremble, become a sharpening stone for the other party to hone his sword technique? It was truly tragic for the Wu people to live to this stage. Therefore, the Wu people decided not to form a team to encircle and kill Gahan, lest his strength continue to rise. They only ordered the smaller tribes under the major tribes to move closer to the major tribes. The 12 tribes lived in groups. This way, Gahan wouldn't be able to break through the tribes' defenses. They were completely avoiding battle. At the same time, Gahan felt that the Wu people's reaction was very strange. According to Gahan's estimation, by the 8th encirclement, the Wu people should have known that the heaven wizard Wu people wouldn't be able to kill Gahan. Only a great wizard could kill Gahan. However, from the beginning to the end, Gahan didn't see a single great wizard attack. It was as if the 12 great wizards among the Wu people had disappeared. It wouldn't be a big deal if they had simply disappeared. It wasn't a bad thing for great wizards to disappear. What Gahan was truly worried about was that the great wizards hadn't disappeared, but were secretly hiding somewhere and plotting something. During this period of time, Gahan had killed over 20 heaven wizards, over 300 intermediate wizards, and over 1,000 junior wizards. This wasn't a small number. It was almost equivalent to 1/10 of the Wu people's strength after the battle. Such a huge loss was enough for the great wizards to chase after Gahan. But in fact, these great magi did not do anything. If they were really plotting something, there must be a huge plot, so huge that these great magi would rather give up 1/10 of their power than give up on their plan. Looks like I need to inform Yao Guang and ask them to pay attention to the Wu people's recent movements. Gahan thought to himself. At the same time, he started to pack his belongings and prepared to return to the Shi-Sing garrison. He had been out for 38 days, and only had 2 days left of the leave he had taken. Moreover, from the 10th battle onwards, Guhan realized that this kind of battle was no longer able to improve his strength by much. In the following 11th and 12th battles, Guhan's strength was stagnant. Moreover, after fighting for 38 days, Gahan's spirit had reached a very tired state. It was time for him to return to the Guardian residence and have a good sleep. He believed that after this mess, the Wu people, who had suffered heavy losses, wouldn't have the guts to attack the Guardian residence again. When he returned to the Guardian residence once again, Guhan noticed that the entire Guardian residence had become much livelier. The Guardian residence, which had been deserted for a long time, was once again occupied by various human buildings. From time to time, teams of ancient sword bearers could be seen patrolling the Guardian residence. Originally, only 3 guest Guardian residences under the Sanshuian garrison that Guhan was in had their own Guardian residences. The other 3 guest Guardian residences didn't have their own Guardian residences and were left empty. But now, these 3 guest Guardian residences already had their own Guardian residences, and these Guardian residences were on their respective thrones. Previously, none of the Guardian residences had been equipped with ancient sword bearers. In the Shi-Sing garrison, Gahan had been a lone commander without any subordinates. However, this time, when Guhan returned to the territory of the *T planet Guardian residence, he discovered that there were 18 ancient sword-rank sword-bearers in his territory. According to the *T planet Guardian residence, there would only be 18 ancient sword-rank sword-bearers in the *T planet Guardian residence when it was full. Obviously, his Guardian residence had already replenished its ancient sword-rank Guardian residence. It seems like the Sword Committee and the Shanghai Pass Management Committee must have been terrified. I'm afraid that the shamans will really break through the great cycle of stars formation. Or else, the Sword Committee headquarters will have to put in a lot of effort to fill all the 10,000 sword bearers in Mountain Sea Pass in just a short period of around 40 days. Guhan was surprised that there were 18 new ancient sword-rank sword-bearers in his Guardian mansion. But on the other hand, these ancient sword-rank sword-bearers were also surprised that they could finally see their own Guardian mansion. To be honest, these ancient sword-bearers were filled with resentment towards Gahan. First of all, these ancient sword bearers had been forcefully transferred to Shanghai Pass by the Sword Committee, and they were already filled with resentment. Everyone knew that Shanghai Pass was a place of death. Moreover, the details of the tragic battle in Shanghai Pass had also been published on the internet. More than 8,000 people had been killed, and every ancient sword bearer who had been forcibly transferred to Shanghai Pass was terrified. They felt that they would not be able to return to the base city alive. Secondly, there was the name of this guardian residences. The name of the Shi-Sing garrison made these ancient sword bearers feel disgusted. Since there were no new names for the Shi-Sing garrison, these ancient sword bearers all had the title of Town Defender of sh*T* above their heads. When these small guardians of sh*T* met other guardians, they wanted to find a hole to hide in. Even if the other party did not mention anything related to sh*T*, these ancient sword bearers could feel that the other party was mocking them in their hearts. Finally, there was the resentment towards Guhan, the sh*T* star guardian. Other famed sword-level guardians would console their ancient sword-tier sword bearers and teach them some survival techniques in Mountain Pass. Finally, they would even give out some sword mark imprints, or RMB, to their subordinates to buy their hearts. However, his guardian had actually taken a 40-day-long leave in one go. From a moment these ancient sword bearers were assigned to sh*T*, they did not even know what their guardian residences looked like, let alone receive any benefits from him. When these resentments were added together, they became extremely powerful. The resentments of the first two could not be vented on the Sword Council or the Great Guard Manor, so in the end, they could only vent it on the unlucky Guhan. Therefore, when Guhan first appeared in the Shi-Sing garrison, these ancient sword bearers immediately gathered at the entrance of the guardian residences, ready to pounce on their superior. At the very least, they wanted to force him to give them a lot of benefits. Chapter 9:37. As soon as he returned to the Guardian's residence and was about to take a good rest to replenish the energy he had expended in the battle with the Wu people, Guhan was suddenly woken up by a commotion at the door. When Guhan opened the door, he saw more than 10 humans blocking his door, shouting something. Guhan looked like a labor contractor surrounded by migrant workers who wanted to pay his wages. After listening for a while, Guhan finally understood what these sword bearers were saying. It turned out that these sword bearers were accusing him of being irresponsible. He had disappeared for more than 30 days in one go, and he did not even do what a superior should do to welcome a newcomer. The newcomers could only miserably learn the rules of Shanghai Pass from the other guardians' residences. Besides that, these ancient sword-rank sword bearers were also complaining that Guhan did not protect them. Other guardians' residences had famed sword bearers protecting them, but they could only rely on themselves. For example, they said that 20 days ago, the Wu people had suddenly launched a surprise attack on the guardians' residence. In the end, the other guardians' residences had all survived the crisis under the leadership of their respective famed sword bearers. Only the 18 ancient sword-rank sword bearers did not have the protection of the famed sword bearers. In the end, 4 intermediate sorcerers from the Wu people killed their way into the poop star. If not for the fact that these 18 ancient sword-rank sword bearers had worked together and helped each other, they would have suffered many casualties. In short, these ancient sword-rank sword bearers were constantly complaining to Guhan. They were complaining that Guhan had not done his duty. All right, I understand what you all mean. Guhan, who was feeling a splitting headache, waved his hand and said gently, "Unfortunately, these ancient sword-rank sword-bearers did not appreciate it and continued to complain." "Shut up." A ray of sword chi flew out of Guhan's hand and flew past the noses of these 18 ancient sword-rank sword-bearers. The noisy scene suddenly became silent. These ancient sword-rank sword-bearers suddenly realized that their superior's temper was not as good as they had thought. "I ask a question, and you answer it. Otherwise, I will move him to the outer area to guard." Guhan's words caused the atmosphere among the ancient sword wielders, who had been united, just a moment ago, to become a little strange. The outer area was naturally more dangerous, and the chances of death were higher. Naturally, none of these ancient sword-rank sword-bearers were willing to guard the outer area. You are abusing your position. You can't do this. An ancient sword-tier swordsman who looked to be in his 20s blamed himself. Generally speaking, there were two types of swordsmen who came to Shanghai Pass. One was the ancient sword-rank sword-bearers who were old and had no potential to advance. The other was the young, sword-rank sword-bearers who were extremely talented. The former were sent here as worthless consumables, while the latter were sent here as training targets. Regardless of whether it was an ancient or famed sword wielder, they all had to follow this rule. This 20-year-old ancient sword-rank sword-bearer had been sent to Shanghai Pass because he was extremely talented. Therefore, he had his own arrogance. Unfortunately, his arrogance was nothing in front of Gahan. Gahan did not believe that there was anyone more talented than him in this world. You need proof to speak. What proof do you have that I am abusing my position to take revenge? Gahan asked the young man. You said it yourself. If I ask a question, you will answer it. Otherwise, I will move him to the outermost area to guard. If this is not abusing your position to take revenge, what is? The young man said loudly, as if Gahan's words were abominable. Didn't your teacher tell you, when you were young, that you have to raise your hand first to answer a question? Lung Qingqiu's words caused the young man's face to turn red. I am your superior. It is natural for me to ask and you to answer. It is also natural for you to maintain the necessary respect for me. This is a rule that must be obeyed everywhere. Am I not your superior? The rest of the ancient sword-rank sword-bearers immediately lowered their heads and dared not say another word. Otherwise, they would be labeled by Gahan as the classic example of disrespecting one's superior. I hereby announce that from now on, you are responsible for guarding Ship Planet Sector 1. You are not allowed to leave New Sector 1 without my order. When he heard that Gahan had assigned him to Sector 1, the young man immediately became listless. Sector 1 was the outermost sector of Ship Planet. If the Wu people really launched an attack, then Sector 1 would definitely be the first sector that the Shi Sing garrison would take a beating. Seeing that this unlucky bastard had decided his tragic fate with a single sentence, the other ancient sword-rank sword-bearers dared not say a word. I know what you want to say. I also admit that it is very inappropriate for me to ignore you for more than 30 days. However, Shanghai Pass has never had a rule that a superior must be responsible for receiving and guiding newcomers. So remember, if you have any ideas, please write me a written report or send me an email. If anyone dares to gather in front of my door and make a ruckus again, I will have him take that unlucky bastard's place. Finally, I heard that you want to ask for benefits from me. Sure, I will give you benefits right now. Hearing that Gahan was going to give them benefits, all the ancient sword-rank sword-bearers looked up in unison. They wanted to know what kind of benefits this overbearing and arrogant superior was going to give them. My benefits are the best in the entire Shanghai Pass. No one in the entire Shanghai Pass can give you better benefits than me. Although these ancient sword-rank sword-bearers thought that Gahan was bragging, it did not stop them from continuously raising their expectations for the benefits. Would this Ship Planet's guardian give everyone a set of sword mark or something like that? Yes. Gahan pronounced the word with emphasis. Then he added, "This is the benefit I am giving you." Yes. What kind of benefit is this? Do you think we will lose our lives just by standing here? The ancient sword-rank sword-bearers were confused and could not understand what Gahan was thinking. All right, let's go. I'm tired. After saying this, Gahan turned around and returned to the Guardian's mansion. With a loud bang, he closed the door of the Guardian's mansion. He no longer cared about these ancient sword-rank sword-bearers. Let's go, let's go. The ancient sword-rank sword-bearers were no longer in the mood to cause a ruckus. They could only go back to their homes and find their mothers. They could not stop thinking about the meaning of this inexplicable benefit called life. Unfortunately, they could not find the answer during their time in Shanghai Pass. It was only when they collectively left Shanghai Pass and returned to the human world that they suddenly realized what the answer meant. Gohan slept for 2 days and 2 nights to completely recover his strength. Then, he brought the mission token to the Tyene Star Garrison. He found the intelligence system of the Tyene Star Garrison and exchanged all the records in the mission token for hero coins and merit points. This was not the same mission token that Gohan had received when he accepted the mission to find Ashima. The previous mission token had already been given to the Tyene Star Garrison when he was exchanging the mission rewards. This was the daily mission token that Gohan had reapplied for after taking a leave of absence. The daily mission token needed to be worn at all times. It was purely used to record the number of Wu people killed. This was because as long as one killed Wu people, even if one did not receive the mission, one would still receive a certain amount of hero coins and merit points as a reward. A minor sorcerer Wu people could receive 100 hero coins and 10 merit points as a reward. An intermediate sorcerer Wu people could receive 1,000 hero coins and 100 merit points as a reward. The Heaven Sorcerer level was 10 times higher than the intermediate sorcerer level. However, it was different for the senior sorcerer level. The reward for the senior sorcerer level was 100 times higher than the Heaven Sorcerer level. This meant that as long as one killed a senior sorcerer, one would receive a huge reward of 1 million hero coins and 100,000 merit points. According to the mission token, Gohan had killed a total of 1,121 minor sorcerers, 321 intermediate sorcerers, and 24 heaven sorcerers in the past 38 days. In total, Gohan would receive 673,100 hero coins and 67,310 merit points as a reward. With these hero coins, Gohan realized that the current amount of hero coins he had was enough to upgrade his 2 famed sword ladies to the 2nd grade. However, after some consideration, Gohan decided to save these hero coins for now. Once he had accumulated 2,200,000 hero coins, he would upgrade his Chidian sword ladies to the 1st grade. A famed sword lady who had activated her ultimate skill was much stronger than 2 2nd-grade sword ladies. At the end of the month, the Tyene Star Garrison started to take stock of the hidden hero coins for the entire month. They were shocked to find out that the amount of hero coins spent this month was 2 times higher than the average of the other months. In other words, the amount of hero coins that Gohan had exchanged for this month was equivalent to the amount of hero coins that the other sword bearers of the Tyene Star Garrison had obtained in 2 months. Since Gohan had exchanged the rewards through a smart computer, the Tyene Star Garrison Management Office had no idea who had exchanged so many hero coins. Only Yao Guang, who had received the report, could not help but smile. Apart from Gohan, no one else in the entire Tyene Star Garrison could do this. However, most of the Guardians were not interested in the abnormal amount of hero coins. What they were interested in was that their lives had suddenly become happy and carefree in the past few months. In the past, the Wu people would launch at least 5 probing attacks on the human defense line. Each attack would result in the deaths of at least 10 unlucky sword bearers. But now, 3 months had passed, and the Sorcerer Tribe had not launched a single attack. The defense line of the Guardian's mansion had been quiet for 3 whole months, which was a rare sight. During this period of time, not a single sword bearer had died while defending. Later on, according to the sword bearers who were scouting around the territory of the Wu people, all the smaller tribes of the Wu people had gathered around the bigger tribes. These tribes were heavily guarded and were staring nervously at the outside world, as if a terrifying enemy would attack them at any time. The nervous expressions of the Wu people were exactly the same as the expressions of the sword bearers hiding behind the defense line. While the Guardians were confused by the Wu people, only Kurakin and Leslie Dracula, who were around Gohan, realized that ever since Gohan returned from his vacation, he had not appeared in front of anyone for 3 months. It was as if he had disappeared from the world. Chapter 938. So where did Gohan go? The answer was that Gohan had been staying in his room in the House of Guardians and had not gone out at all. Or rather, he had not gone out for the past 3 months. Gohan had spent all his time lying in bed, staying in Sword Maiden Online through the game capsule. Yes, that's right. For the past 3 months, Gahan had been staying in Sword Maiden Online. The reason was very simple. Gahan wanted to find Kinzu, or rather, find Kinzu's sword soul. After exchanging the hero coins that day, Gahan had been thinking about how he could further improve his swordsmanship. There was a limit to how much he could improve his swordsmanship by fighting against the Sorcerer Tribe. In the end, the Sorcerer Tribe members at the level of Heaven Sorcerer Tribe had no effect on Guhan. Perhaps he could only gain something from fighting the Sorcerer Tribe members at the level of Great Sorcerer Tribe. However, the problem was that he did not know where all the great wizards of the Wu people were hiding. Even if they allowed their clansmen to be slaughtered by Gahan, they would not come out to face Gahan. In desperation, Gahan could only give up the idea of fighting with the great wizards and look for other ways to improve his swordsmanship. In fact, Gahan knew that the best opponent in the world to improve his swordsmanship was none other than a master swordsman among the sword-bearers. The most powerful swordsman in the world today was undoubtedly the Mystic Sword Soul. However, this Mystic Sword Soul was definitely not in Shanghai Pass. It was impossible for Gahan to find the Mystic Sword Soul as his opponent. As for the sword-bearers in Shanghai Pass, in Gahan's eyes, only Liu Ling's swordsmanship could help him hone his swordsmanship. However, Gahan did not intend to be too close to Liu Ling. This was because Gahan knew that with the Black Tortoise incident, Gahan would sooner or later kill his way to the Liu clan and have a huge battle with them. He would force the Liu clan to release all the sword soul marks of Kinzu that they had kept. Then, Gahan and Kinzu would have a battle that transcended time and space. Only by killing Kinzu's sword soul with his own hands could Gahan be able to erase the hatred in his heart for the Black Tortoise that had been brought to the past by Kinzu. He couldn't count on the sword bearers within Shanghai Pass, but Guhan couldn't get out of Shanghai Pass either. Therefore, there was only one way for Guhan to find a strong opponent, and that was Sword Maiden Online. That's right, Guhan only had one purpose for staying in Sword Maiden Online for the past 3 months, and that was to further hone and improve his swordsmanship with the help of all kinds of opponents in Sword Maiden Online to perfect his chaos sword art. At the beginning, Gahan suggested to Tamono Kakashi that Tamono Kakashi create a small instance dungeon for him. Then, there would be some powerful opponents in the instance dungeon for Gahan to train himself. To this, Masato Tamono didn't say anything else and gave a clear refusal. No matter how small the instance dungeon was, as long as it exceeded the rules of Sword Maiden Online and created a separate instance dungeon, Tamono Kakashi's actions would be immediately discovered by the scientists who were monitoring her. Then, she would be punished severely. This was a risk that Tamono Kakashi was absolutely unwilling to take. After hearing Tamono Kakashi's reason, Gahan did not force the other party. It did not matter even if he did not have Tamono Kakashi's help. Gahan could find his own opponent. As a result, the games were suddenly thrown into chaos. Military Governor, who had disappeared for a month, once again appeared in front of all the players. However, this time, Military Governor did not appear in front of the players as a powerful instance dungeon finisher. Instead, he appeared as a crazy challenger. Military Governor first appeared on a sunny afternoon. The Spirit Sword level swordbearer, Ouyang Ji, had just left the instance dungeon clearance center and was about to return to his sword tomb when a player suddenly stood in front of him. "You are Ouyang Ji?" This player was wearing a tall hat that completely covered his face. Therefore, Ouyang Ji could not see the other party's appearance clearly. He just felt that the other party was a little familiar. "I am Ouyang Ji. What business do you have with me?" Ouyang Ji nodded arrogantly. As a rare spirit sword level swordbearer in the game, Ouyang Ji indeed had a reason to be arrogant. "Is Lady Phaseless Divine Sword your sword lady?" The player who deliberately covered his face asked again. All the players on the forum know that my sword lady is the famous Lady Phaseless Divine Sword. Why do you have to ask a question you already know the answer to? What is your purpose? Ouyang Ji was a little unhappy. "Spar with me," the player said calmly. "Spar?" Ouyang Ji rolled his eyes. "Sorry, I have no interest in sparring with a nobody. Wait until you become as famous as me." After saying that, Ouyang prepared to leave this inexplicable player. Wait, this person reached out to stop Ouyang and then showed his shiny golden name. F*CK, Lord Military Governor. Ouyang was so scared that he fell to the ground. How could he be so lucky to meet this god? One day, such news suddenly spread in the game. Hey, have you heard? The military governor disappeared for a month and appeared again. He even took the initiative to challenge a spirit sword level swordbearer named Ouyang. In a tea house, a player and a few friends said excitedly, "What? The military governor appeared again and challenged a spirit sword level swordbearer, and he failed?" The player's friend shook his head repeatedly. Impossible. The military governor clearly defeated an immortal sword-level sword-bearer in the 8 Cities tournament. How could he lose to a small spirit sword-level sword-bearer? Yes, I know this Ouyang. He also participated in the 8 Cities tournament. However, this Ouyang didn't even squeeze into the top 64. How could he be a match for the military governor? Your news must be fake. Bah, I heard this from the brother-in-law of the wife of Ouyang's friend's brother. How could it be fake? The players said, unconvinced. Who believes you? The braggers at the table immediately boasted and expressed their disdain for this player who spread gossip. As a result, after boasting for a while, a player with a big white name above his head swaggered in. When these braggers saw this, they thought, my God, isn't the name above this player's head Ouyang? So these braggers immediately pulled Ouyang to their table, helped him order food, poured him wine, and said a lot of good things. Finally, they couldn't suppress the curiosity in their hearts and asked Ouyang, "Brother Ouyang, I heard that you defeated the military governor. Is this true?" You want to know? Ouyang first kept them guessing. When these braggers felt uncomfortable, he slammed his fist on the table and said in a loud voice that the entire tea house could hear, "Yes, Grandpa did defeat the military governor." Ouyang's voice instantly attracted the players in the entire tea house to his side. Although 80% of the players thought that Ouyang was bragging, because they were full of interest in the military governor who had disappeared for a month, they were also very interested to hear how Ouyang was bragging. Let me tell you, in fact, the military governor took the initiative to ask me to fight. I couldn't refuse even if I wanted to. So, the two of us fought for 3 hours in the ring. In the end, I was better and broke the military governor's personal shield. After that, the military governor simply admitted defeat. Ouyang said proudly, "You're bragging, you. The military governor could beat a fairy sword wielder. How could he lose to you? Why don't you show us the video and we'll believe you?" A player jeered. "Who said I didn't record it? I'll show you the video now." Ouyang's face turned red. He immediately took out his personal terminal. After a few clicks, a video was projected in the air. Everyone quickly turned their attention to the video. Ouyang really did not lie. The person standing opposite him was really the player who had the Golden King of Yuzgo stomping the Sword Instance Dungeons #1 and surrendered the military governor. Everyone looked at the playback time of the video. It was actually 185 minutes long. Therefore, for the next 3 hours, everyone was immersed in this video. At the end, when the military governor's personal shield was broken by the phaseless sword and he admitted defeat, everyone came to their senses. Oh my God, the military governor actually lost. A player covered his mouth in disbelief. But why do I feel that this video is so weird? The military governor fought so awkwardly. He didn't have the golden heaven and earth strength that he showed in the 8 Cities conference at all. It feels like, another player said with a weird expression, "It feels like a normal person, right?" A player with a face full of beard, who looked very experienced, answered the previous player's question. Didn't you guys notice? This military governor didn't use any skills from the beginning to the end. Moreover, the surface of his sword lady didn't have any flowing light covering it. This can only mean one thing. The military governor didn't use sword element during the battle. Are you kidding? Which sword wielder doesn't use sword element during a battle? A player did not believe the bearded player's words at all. That's right. A sword wielder who doesn't use sword element is only physically stronger than a normal person. Other than that, he's exactly the same as a normal person. Let's not talk about the military governor who is a famed sword level. Even an emperor sword level sword wielder would lose to a spiritual sword level sword lady if he didn't use sword element. Another player continued to say, I don't King understand this, but the truth is that this military governor really didn't use any sword element. However, did you guys pay attention to the sword skill that this military governor used? In terms of sword skill alone, the military governor's sword skill is more than a few times better than during the 8 Cities Conference. The bearded player said with a face full of admiration. Hey, Brother Ouyang, is this brother right? Did the military governor really not use sword element throughout the battle? Hence, the other players looked at Ouyang Chigua with questioning eyes. That's true. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the ability to defeat Sir Military Governor. Ouyang Chigua smiled awkwardly, but he admitted it straightforwardly. When the onlookers were about to interrogate Ouyang Chigua about the specific situation, Ouyang Chigua's personal terminal suddenly notified him that a text message had been sent. Ouyang Chigua opened the text message and immediately jumped up from his seat. He cupped his fists at the onlookers around him. I'm sorry. Sir Military Governor said that he wants to fight with me again, so I'm going now. After saying that, Ouyang Chigua left the tea house quickly, leaving the onlookers dumbfounded. Chapter 9:39. After about 5 or 6 hours, Ouyang Shusheng returned to the tea house with weak footsteps and somewhat weak nerves. Most of the spectators who had been listening to Ouyang Shusheng had left, but there were still 3 or 4 spectators in the tea house. They were obviously waiting for Ouyang Shusheng here. As soon as they saw Ouyang Shusheng, they immediately stopped him and asked him about the situation of the battle. Oh my God, this time I fought for 4.5 hours, almost died of exhaustion. Ouyang Shusheng said very tiredly, and then once again gathered all his strength and shouted loudly in the tea house. But Grandpa, I defeated the military governor for the 2nd time. Even if I die of exhaustion, I'm willing. Just like before, this time, Ouyang Shusheng's words once again attracted the attention of a large number of players, and they once again surrounded Ouyang Shusheng. After Ouyang Shusheng showed off for a while, he very simply played the video of the 2nd battle. This time, the length of the video was 4.5 hours, and the process of the battle was almost exactly the same as the previous one. Without using the sword element, the military governor relied on his exquisite swordsmanship to launch a fierce battle with the spirit sword level Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword. In the end, the Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword still broke the military governor's personal shield and won the battle. But this time, there were a few very key points that were different from the last time. The first and most important point was that the time was different. Previously, the military governor failed in 3 hours, but this time, the military governor delayed the time to 4.5 hours. The second was the personal shield of the Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword. Although the personal shield of the Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword also lost a certain amount of energy last time. The energy was not much, only about 20% of the total. But this time, the Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword lost more than 30% of the personal shield energy. From these 2 points, it could be seen that the military governor in the 2nd battle had improved a lot compared to the military governor in the 1st battle. The news of the military governor's reappearance and the strange battle with the spirit sword level players instantly spread throughout the game. After a month, posts related to the military governor flooded the forums once again. Ouyang Shichi was also very business-minded and uploaded his video to the forum. However, because the other party involved in the video, the military governor, did not authorize Ouyang Shichi, so Ouyang Shichi could not set a fee for the video. He could only provide it as a free video for everyone. The post spread like wildfire in the forum. Many players rushed to the forum to click on the news about the military governor when they learned that the military governor had reappeared. Then they saw the video that stunned them. In the next few days, Ouyang geometry no longer appeared in the tea house. Instead, he constantly posted new battle videos on the forum. They were all battle videos of the military governor challenging him. The third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time, the military governor challenged Ouyang Geometry's Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword again and again. Although the Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword won in the end, the duration of each battle was longer than the previous one. The Lady Phaseless Sacred Sword also lost more personal shield energy than the previous one. In the end, on the seventh attempt, after a full 8 hours of arduous battle, the commander finally broke through the Lady Phaseless Divine Sword's personal protective shield. He still had about 10% of his personal protective shield left, so he could be considered to have achieved a legitimate victory. Although this was the result that all the players had already guessed, when they really saw that a sword wielder was actually able to defeat a spirit sword level sword mistress without using sword essence. This kind of violent shock swept through the hearts of every player like a storm. Only then did they realize that simple sword techniques could also be terrifying to such an extent to actually be able to directly defeat a powerful spirit sword level sword mistress who went all out. However, Ouyang Chigua's defeat did not signify the end of the Admiral's journey. In just a short span of 2 days, another player named Yi Mogu Chang copied Ouyang Chigua's actions and uploaded his own battle video onto the forum. Yi Mogu Chang's opponent was none other than the Admiral. Yi Mogu City's Spirit Sword level sword mistress was the famous Blood Transformation Sword. It was said that it was a sword modified from the Blood Transformation Sword. It was a powerful demonic sword. The Phaseless Sacred Sword was ranked 39th in the Spirit Sword record, while the Blood Transformation Sword was ranked 27th in the Famous Swords record, which was 12 places ahead of the Phaseless Sacred Sword. The Spirit Sword record was not like the Treasure Sword record or the Famous Swords record, because there were a lot of sword mistresses in the Treasure Sword record and the Famous Swords record. The gap between each rank was not big. Moreover, it did not mean that the one with a higher rank would definitely win. Many times, there was the possibility of a counterattack. However, in the Spirit Sword record, unless the sword wielder of both sides had a difference of more than tens of thousands of sword essence, it was difficult for the Spirit Swords to counterattack. This was because the difference between each name in the Spirit Sword record was quite huge. Therefore, when the military governor and the Blood Transformation Sword lady fought in the first battle, the military governor, who had defeated the Phaseless Sacred Sword lady before, suffered a crushing defeat this time. In less than 2 hours, the Admiral had been defeated by Lady Swords of the Bloodline Extinction Goddess. However, the plot after that was the same as what Ouyang Qiushi had experienced. The military governor continuously issued challenges to the Blood Transformation Sword lady. In 5 days, he issued a total of 8 challenge invitations. Each challenge took more time and consumed more energy than the previous one. The military governor was progressing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Therefore, Yi Mogucheng also ushered in the same ending as Ouyang Qiushi. In the end, he was defeated by the military governor. It was just that Yi Mogucheng was a little luckier than Ouyang Qiushi, because Ouyang Qiushi was defeated on the 7th time, but Yi Mogucheng persisted until the 9th time. There was nothing much to say about the following plot. It was nothing more than a reincarnation of the previous plot. The inspector continued to challenge the Spirit Sword rank sword maidens who were rank higher than him, and he continued to grow in defeat after defeat, and finally defeated his opponent. This kind of challenge lasted for a whole month, and the entire forum also discussed for a whole month. This discussion even gradually spread to the world outside the game. Many sword bearers who never played games in real life also discovered that such a madman had appeared in the game. He was actually able to defeat so many sword ladies of the Spirit Sword realm without using sword element. Although these sword ladies were sword ladies in the game, in theory, their strength was slightly weaker than the real sword ladies. However, these sword ladies were actually the consciousness fragments of natural sword ladies. Their own swordsmanship was almost at the same level as the real sword ladies. If the sword ladies in the game were defeated, the real sword ladies might not be much stronger. Gradually, these few questions formed in the hearts of the people in the military governor's challenge. First, was the sword essence really as important as people thought? Would humans be able to kill the powerful Yuanko even without the sword element? Second, what was the limit of the military governor without using the sword essence? Then, without using the sword essence, could he defeat an immortal sword wielder or even an emperor sword wielder? Third, could ordinary humans achieve the same swordsmanship as the military governor? If they could, didn't this mean that even if ordinary humans could not synchronize with the sword ladies, as long as they had a weapon that could hurt Yuan Ko, could they also become an existence equivalent to a spirit sword wielder? This kind of question constantly lingered in the minds of humans, and it even gradually formed a logic called useless sword essence theory. Many humans who aspired to become sword wielders, but were forever blocked at the door because they could not synchronize with the sword ladies, seemed to have seen the dawn of their lives. They learned from this military governor and practiced a good swordsmanship. They could also fight for humanity. Probably aware of the impact of this trend, on the 25th day of the military governor's challenge, the official media of the 8 major base cities published such an editorial almost at the same time. First of all, the author of this editorial was very shocking. This was because the author was none other than the emperor of sword wielders, the great Hao Tianjin. In this editorial, Hao Tianjin first explained why the military governor wanted a challenge like this. Hao Tianjin said that this was because the military governor was training his swordsmanship. He wanted to reach a higher level of swordsmanship. That was all. There was no other purpose. Following that, the Clear Sky Sword Emperor very clearly answered a few questions from above. First, the sword essence was indeed very important. The sword essence was the foundation of every sword wielder. A sword wielder could not go astray on this path. Working hard to improve one's sword essence was the best way to become stronger. However, Hao Tianjin also admitted that humans could indeed kill the powerful Yuan Ko without the sword essence. Secondly, without using sword essence, the limit of a human being's ability to defeat a universe-grade Yuan Ko, which was the human's immortal grade sword wielder. Hao Tianjin could make such a judgment because Hao Tianjin had discovered this after looking up the information of the Liuyan family. After Kanzu became an emperor sword wielder, he had given up on using the sword essence for a period of time. Instead, he had relied on his swordsmanship like the military governor. His Majesty Kanzu's strongest achievement was using swordsmanship to defeat universe-level Yuan Ko. As for flood-level and desolation-level Yuan Ko, Kanzu had used the sword essence every time he encountered them. He had never thought of using swordsmanship to defeat his opponent. His Majesty Kanzu was unparalleled. The limit that he could reach was naturally the limit that other sword wielders could reach. Therefore, universe-level Yuan Ko was the limit that could be reached. This player, called the military governor, could only reach this limit in his lifetime. Third, Hao Tianjin also told everyone clearly that normal people could not reach the same level of swordsmanship as the military governor. Hao Tianjin even revealed that he had met the military governor in real life. The military governor was also a very powerful sword wielder in real life. More importantly, the military governor was extremely talented. He was not inferior to Tianjin back then. That was why he had achieved so much and trained himself by fighting with the sword lady. More importantly, although the military governor did not use the sword essence, he was a true famed sword wielder. The sword lady in his hand was a real famed sword lady. When he was one with his mind, he could unleash the sword lady's true power. This power was something that normal people could not unleash even if they held a famed sword lady. At the same time, the military governor's physique was dozens of times better than normal people. For example, the footwork that the military governor used in the recording was so fast that it was impossible for a normal person to reach such a high speed. Therefore, if a normal person wanted to imitate the military governor, it would undoubtedly be like a child learning to walk. It would only be a joke. However, it was not impossible to imitate the military governor's path. Most people only needed to practice hard and reach a certain level of swordsmanship. In that case, as long as one had an artificial sword maiden that could not be synchronized, they would be able to fight against Mouse and Tiger Yuenko. In other words, they would be equivalent to an ancient sword tier swordsman. Some sword bearers with outstanding swordsmanship could fight ghost level and soul level Yuanko. They were equivalent to treasured sword bearers. However, this was the limit of a normal person. In the end, Hao Tianjindi made a concluding statement. Sword bearers were not allowed to learn the military governor's fighting style. They were also not allowed to practice their own swordsmanship. This was because before they could master their swordsmanship, they would die under Yuanko's attacks because they did not have the protection of the sword lady. As for normal people, they could try to practice swordsmanship. If they found that they had good swordsmanship talent, they could try to practice swordsmanship. At the same time, the Sword Committee also wanted to set up experimental classes for sword masters in the 8 base cities academies. Ordinary people with decent talent in swordsmanship could sign up for these experimental classes. The Sword Committee would conduct a comprehensive study on the possibility of letting ordinary sword masters join the battle. After Hao Tianjindi's editorial was published, the entire human society was instantly in an uproar. A large number of media outlets analyzed Hao Tianjindi's speech and found that if the sword master teaching classes were successful, normal people would also have the strength to fight Yuanko. Then, the power of human beings would undoubtedly enter a new era. One could imagine the scene of an army made up of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of normal people fighting against Yuanko. All in all, the whole world became different after Gohan's challenge. As the core person who caused all this, Gohan knew nothing about the outside world. He was completely immersed in improving his swordsmanship. Chapter 940. In reality, all ordinary people felt their blood boiling because of Hao Tianjindi's editorial and felt that a new era of mankind was coming. On the other hand, the players' expectations for the military governor had also risen to the peak because the military governor had previously defeated the 8th ranked spiritual sword-level swordmistress. According to the order, the military governor should challenge the 7th ranked spiritual sword-level swordmistress. However, not all spiritual sword-level swordmistresses in the game had their own sword-bearers. In fact, in the entire game, there were only 2 sword-bearers who had spiritual sword-level swordmistresses ranked in the top 7. One of the spiritual sword-level swordmistresses was an old acquaintance of Gohan. It was Liquorguard, the spiritual sword-level swordmistress who had fought against Gohan in the 8-city tournament. Her spiritual sword-level swordmistress was the 5th-ranked spiritual sword-level swordmistress, Jean. In a room full of medieval style, Liquorguard sat silently on her bed, looking at her personal terminal from time to time, as if waiting for some important communication. Behind Liquorguard, a girl in silver-white steel armor and her sword mistress maintained the same posture, sitting upright on the bed. The two of them were like 2 statues. "It's here." Liquorguard felt her personal terminal vibrate, and then a message was directly sent to her mind. After reading the message, Liquorguard immediately stood up from the bed like a spring, clenched her hands tightly into fists, and turned to look at sword mistress Jean behind her. "Jean, our chance to avenge our humiliation has finally come." When Liquorguard said this, her mood became obviously agitated. The pair of huge breasts on her chest wantonly swayed, rolled, and pushed each other. Since being defeated by the military governor in the 8-city tournament in a humiliating way, Liquorguard had been thinking about how to take revenge all the time. At the same time, she trained herself in a way that could be called abusive. In terms of self-esteem, Liquorguard felt that her body had more than doubled. Now it was finally time for her revenge. All the players in the game were looking forward to the battle between Jean d'Arc and the military governor, but unlike before, there was no news about this battle released in the forum. It was as if the military governor had stopped his challenge. For 5 consecutive days, the entire forum was quiet. Just when everyone thought that the military governor had given up, a new message exploded on the forum. A player with a verified game ID, LiquorGuard, suddenly posted on the forum. From today onwards, my game ID LiquorGuard. My real name is LiquorGuard Dracula. I voluntarily recognize the military governor as my godfather, and I voluntarily become the goddaughter of the military governor. Be it my loyal followers and subordinates in the game or in reality, all my honor, wealth, and everything belong to military governor daddy. Such a simple post instantly blew up the entire forum like an atomic bomb. No one understood what was going on. Why did LiquorGuard post such a seemingly inexplicable post? Why did she suddenly recognize the military governor as her father? Just when everyone was discussing this matter, a player with the ID Leslie on the forum gave all the curious players an explanation. She even posted the long-awaited battle video of Jean d'Arc and the military governor on the forum. After watching the battle video, the players finally realized what had happened. The video started in a ring. On both sides of the ring were LiquorGuard and the military governor. First, the military governor thanked LiquorGuard in a very tired voice for accepting his challenge. Then, he explained that he would only fight against Jean d'Arc and that he would not use his sword element in the battle. At this point, according to the usual script, LiquorGuard should have nodded in agreement with the military governor's battle method. Then, after the usual battle etiquette, the duel would officially begin. However, LiquorGuard became the first sword wielder to object to the duel. She said that she was also a sword master and that she wanted to defeat the military governor in a duel between sword masters. In other words, LiquorGuard wanted to defeat her opponent with her own swordsmanship, just like the military governor did. It was obvious that the military governor was a little surprised by this request, but after a short moment of consideration, he said that he could accept LiquorGuard's suggestion. Just when the military governor thought that he could start the duel, LiquorGuard made a new request. This LiquorGuard actually said that she wanted to fight fair and square and obtain a fair and square victory. That was why she didn't use her sword element in the duel. She wanted to compete with the military governor in pure swordsmanship. The military governor decisively refused. The military governor said that he chose this duel to hone his swordsmanship. If LiquorGuard didn't use her sword element, the military governor wouldn't be able to hone his swordsmanship. This duel would be a waste of time. The military governor's words made LiquorGuard go berserk. This was because there was a hidden meaning in his words. The military governor said that a simple duel with LiquorGuard wouldn't be able to hone his swordsmanship. It was obvious that LiquorGuard's swordsmanship was too different from his level. She wasn't even qualified to be his opponent. This made LiquorGuard go berserk. LiquorGuard repeatedly asked the military governor to have a fair duel with her. However, the military governor refused without hesitation. When he was about to leave the arena, LiquorGuard suddenly said, "You coward! You must be afraid of losing to me." Have you forgotten that during the 8 Cities Conference, you were already defeated by my sword when you used sword essence? There is no need for such a battle. The military governor refused again. He then directly blocked LiquorGuard's path of retreat. Don't forget, you are already my subordinate in the game. You have to listen to my orders. Don't make such a meaningless request. This is not a meaningless request. Back then it was you who... LiquorGuard touched her pair of huge opies. Her eyes were so anxious that tears almost flowed out. It was obvious that she blamed the military governor for attacking her opies crazily during the battle, which led to her defeat. Hearing LiquorGuard's words, the military governor could not help but blush. At that time, the difference between his sword essence and LiquorGuard's was too huge. Therefore, he had no choice but to use such an unpresentable method. It was only natural that LiquorGuard would not accept her defeat because she was resentful. Seeing that the military governor did not speak, LiquorGuard seemed to want to reject her like before. Therefore, LiquorGuard decided to go all out and once again put her life at stake. If you can defeat me, not only will I be your subordinate in the game, but I will also be your subordinate in real life and listen to your orders. The military governor's eyes lit up when he heard this. According to Gahan's plan for his life, it was indeed time for him to consider recruiting his own sword-bearers in real life and build his own army. After all, apart from the few Jindy during the Great Destruction, every Emperor Sword-level sword-bearers had their own powerful army. All right, Liquorguard, this silly girl, was betting her entire life. Chapter 941. After fighting with Liquorguard again, Gahan had to admit that she had improved a lot in the past 3 months. Her strength was no longer the same as when she was at the 8 Cities tournament. Unfortunately, it was useless because Gahan had also improved a lot in the past 3 months. Not only had his sword essence in the game increased by 4 times, reaching 80,000 quarks of sword essence, but Gahan's own swordsmanship had also improved greatly. So compared to the 8 Cities tournament, Liquorguard was defeated even faster. Moreover, Gahan did not use any opportunistic moves like attacking his opponent's OP. He used one terrifying sword move after another to completely disintegrate Liquorguard. Moreover, after Gahan used sword essence, his attack power increased by many times. It didn't even take Gahan 3 minutes to defeat Liquorguard with his sword in just 1 minute. He left Liquorguard to fall to the ground alone, feeling lost. Are you satisfied now? You can spar with me according to my request. Gahan walked in front of Liquorguard and said to her. Liquorguard did not say anything. She felt as if she had been completely broken by Gahan. Forget it. Why don't you take a good rest today? I'll come back to you tomorrow. Seeing Liquorguard's state, Gahan knew that she could no longer fight with him. Just as Gahan was about to leave, the holy sword of Jean in Liquorguard's hand suddenly turned into a bright light and appeared in front of Gahan in the form of a girl in armor. Greetings, Dame Jean d'Arc. Gahan saluted the young lady. Didn't you want to fight me? Lady Jean stared at Gahan with bright eyes. Come on, I'll satisfy you now. Let's fight. I'll use my full strength, and you won't use sword essence. That's exactly what I wanted. Gahan nodded. Since Lady Jean took the initiative to spar with him, Gahan naturally had no reason to refuse. But you have to promise me a bet. Jean d'Arc was indeed worthy of being the sword mistress of Liquorguard. This was the 3rd wager of the competition. What bet? Gahan asked curiously. From Gahan's point of view, Liquorguard had already lost both in the game and in real life. What else could she possibly have? If I win this battle, then everything Liquorguard has promised you will be nullified. Liquorguard will regain her freedom, and you will no longer have any relationship with her. If I lose, then Liquorguard will recognize you as her father. All of her, including her flesh, will be yours. I can even tell you this news. Liquorguard only needs 20,000 quarks of sword essence in reality to become a spirit sword-level sword-bearer. And once she meets the sword essence requirement of a spirit sword-level sword-bearer, she will definitely be able to synchronize with my real body in reality. Are you satisfied with these conditions? Hearing Jean d'Arc's words, the military governor was indeed very satisfied. This was simply an irresistible condition. Not to mention anything else. Just Liquorguard's surging body alone was enough for the military governor to recoup his losses. What's more, Liquorguard was about to become a spirit sword-level sword-bearer in reality. And with the guarantee of Jean d'Arc's consciousness fragment, this almost meant that Liquorguard could 100% successfully synchronize with Jean d'Arc in reality and become a spirit sword-level sword-bearer. In 5 days, no matter how many times I challenge you, as long as I can defeat you within 5 days, I win this bet. What do you think? The military governor asked Jean d'Arc, but Jean d'Arc was about to admit it, but she was interrupted by the military governor. You are just Liquorguard's sword mistress. You're not qualified to make decisions for Liquorguard. That's why I hope it's Liquorguard herself who promises me this, and not you, Dame Jean. Jean d'Arc's decision is my Arc's decision. We are one. At the same time, Liquorguard, who had suffered a blow, seemed to have recovered her willpower. She stood up firmly and said to Gahan. Okay. Gahan nodded. This new bet was officially established. Then, just like the previous challenge launched by the military governor, after a few hours of hard fighting, the military governor, who did not use his sword element, was defeated by Jean d'Arc. Liquorguard thought that the other party would be eager to challenge her again the next day for the sake of the bet. But to Liquorguard's surprise, not only did he not appear on the second day, but the military governor also did not appear on the third and fourth day. It was not until the fifth day that the military governor contacted Liquorguard in the last few hours and said that the battle could start again. "Why didn't you come to me a few days ago?" Liquorguard asked the military governor curiously before the battle began. "There's a problem in reality. Some ignorant Yuenko came to die, and I've already killed them." The military governor shrugged and said, "In fact, in the past 3 days, the Wu people suddenly launched a strange attack on the Zhou Star battle formation. The reason why this attack was a little strange was because the Wu people's battle at the beginning was very loud. The entire Wu people's army of tens of thousands of troops pressed forward, as if they were going to fight to the death with the humans. But the problem was that these Wu people's attacking troops did not have a Grand Magus to hold the line. All the Grand Magi were still in a state of disappearance. Moreover, this time, the Wu people's attack was very sudden, and they also retreated very suddenly. When the front line of Shanghai Pass was in a precarious situation and the Guardian's Mansion was about to give the order to give up the few areas guarding the outermost area, the shamans who still had the upper hand retreated without any hesitation. They even gave up on the areas that they thought they could take down with just a little more effort. Because as Shi Sing garrison was the front line of the battlefield, the sudden attack forced the military governor to temporarily leave the game world and lead his ancient sword wielders to defend the city. After the Wu people retreated, he guarded the city for a few days, and when he was sure that the Wu people would not launch another surprise attack, he re-entered the game. Although this was undoubtedly a great victory, it seriously raised the suspicions of the Shanghai Pass and the Sword Committee headquarters. The Wu people's abnormal behavior made people suspect that the Wu people were brewing a new conspiracy. Therefore, under the deployment of the Sunstar Garrison and the Tying Star Garrison, all kinds of sword wielders accepted reconnaissance missions, trying to figure out what kind of conspiracy the Wu people were brewing. Of course, this had nothing to do with Gahan for the time being. Guhan's full attention was still on how to perfect his chaos sword art. He rushed to go online during the last period of the 5th day and launched a battle with Liquorguard that would determine her freedom and fate. It was an extremely fierce battle. In order to prevent her sword wielder from becoming someone else's slave, or rather, her daughter, Jean could be said to have used the most powerful swordsmanship in her several reincarnations. After that, when Jean's true self retrieved this fragment of consciousness and completely read the entire battle memory, she had to admit that even Jean's true self couldn't do this in reality. The energy of Gahan and Jean's personal shield decreased like 2 spirals as the battle continued. The gap between the two of them was no more than 3% of the personal shield's energy. When there was only 5% of the personal shield's energy left, Jean finally used her almost self-destructive ultimate skill, My Lord's Descent. At the cost of reducing the sword element limit of the sword wielder by 10,000 points and not being able to transform into a sword maiden for a month, she obtained the powerful effect of Angel's Descent, which increased all attributes by 10 times. Both Jean and Liquorguard felt that after using this skill, they would definitely win and defeat this unbelievably powerful human. However, in the next few minutes, Liquorguard and Jean saw the most dazzling sword in their lives. It was a sword art that was like a flying fairy. It came inexplicably and disappeared inexplicably. Liquorguard and Jean did not even know what happened. The remaining 5% of the personal shield on Jean's body collapsed in an instant. At this time, the military governor's personal shield only had 2% left. Let's call this skill Chaos Flying Fairy. After muttering this sentence, the military governor fell to the ground like a corpse and fell into a deep coma. He was then forced to go offline by the game. Liquorguard and Jean were left dumbfounded. What a pity. Just one more step. But that Chaos Flying Fairy was so beautiful. Liquorguard clasped her hands in front of her chest and said as if she was praying, "Damn it, I'll let you down. I shouldn't have continued this bet with that damned human." I've caused you to completely fall into it. Jean's face was full of regret. There were even a few drops of tears in her eyes. It's okay. This is a decision made by both of us. We need to bear it together. Liquorguard pulled Jean into her arms and gently kissed Jean's eyes, kissing Jean's tears into her mouth. This was truly a scene as beautiful as a lily in full bloom. Wait, Liquorguard, we might not have lost yet. Jean was excited. She pointed at the clock on the arena. It was now 12:10. Jean remembered that her battle with Gahan had ended less than 10 minutes ago. In other words, this victory was actually achieved on the sixth day. If one were to strictly look at the words, then it could be said that Liquorguard had obtained the final victory. That was why she was so excited. No, a loss is a loss. I'm not someone who can't afford to lose. Surprisingly, even though there was such a legitimate and perfect excuse for her to get rid of her terrible fate and become a father to a strange man, Liquorguard simply rejected this excuse. That's really your style. Jean looked at Liquorguard with an expression that was unknown whether it was hatred or admiration. Then, the recording ended. The audience on the forum were silent. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.